The hospital room went silent when billionaire Grant Kincaid spoke. His ex-wife Marina stood frozen, designer handbag trembling in her manicured hands. His son Jace's face turned the color of spoiled milk, because Grant had just announced that they, his own flesh and blood, would not be accepting his Lifetime Achievement Award at Friday's gala. Instead, he was giving that honor to Sophie Hart, the assistant, the nobody, the woman Marina had once called the coffee girl with delusions. And in that sterile room with its beeping machines and antiseptic smell, Sophie realized her invisible life was about to explode into something she couldn't control. Stay with me until the end of this story. It gets wild. And please, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far Sophie's journey travels. Sophie Hart had perfected the art of being invisible. She knew exactly how to slip through the executive floor of Kincaid Industries without drawing eyes. Shoulders slightly hunched, gaze down, bouffant measured and quiet. She knew which hallways the executives preferred and which routes would keep her out of their sightlines. She knew how Grant Kincaid took his coffee, black, extra hot, in the blue mug his daughter had given him before she died, how he liked his reports, spiral-bound, never stapled, and how he needed exactly 7 minutes of silence after difficult calls before he'd be ready to speak again. What Sophie didn't know, what she couldn't have possibly known, was that Grant Kincaid noticed absolutely everything about her. It was Tuesday morning when her phone rang. Sophie was in her tiny kitchen, making chocolate chip pancakes for her daughter Mia. The apartment was small enough that she could watch Mia color at the table while flipping pancakes at the stove. Small enough that every sound carried, small enough that she'd memorized which floorboards creaked and stepped around them when Mia was sleeping. "Mama, you're burning them," Mia announced without looking up from her princess coloring book. Sophie jerked the spatula under the pancake and flipped it just in time. "Good catch, baby." When her phone buzzed, she assumed it was Tessa, her cousin and the only family member who still talked to her after the divorce. But the screen showed Grant Kincaid's direct line. Her stomach dropped. Grant never called her personal phone. Never. Whatever went through his assistant came through office channels, through email, through the carefully maintained professional distance that Sophie relied on like armor. "Hello? Sophie." Grant's voice sounded different, strained, tired in a way that made her chest tighten with worry. "I need you to come to Metropolitan General, room 847. Don't tell anyone else where you're going." The line went dead. Sophie stared at her phone, pancake batter dripping from the spatula onto the floor. "Mama?" Mia's voice was small. "Is something wrong?" Everything in Sophie wanted to say no, to smile and serve breakfast and pretend the world was still small and safe and manageable. But Mia was 6 years old and smart as a whip, and she could smell lies the way other kids smelled cookies. "I have to go help Mr. Kincaid with something," Sophie said carefully. "But Tessa's going to come stay with you, okay? And when I get back, we'll have pancakes for dinner, too." Mia wrinkled her nose. "Pancakes twice in one day?" "Special circumstances." Sophie called Tessa while pulling on her most professional blazer, the navy one that hid the coffee stain on the left sleeve if she kept her arm at the right angle. Tessa picked up on the first ring. "What's wrong?" "I need you to watch Mia. Emergency. Grant called from the hospital." There was a pause. Then Tessa's voice dropped into that fierce protective tone she'd perfected over the years of watching Sophie get knocked down and get back up. "Sophie, you don't owe that man your whole life." "He's in the hospital, Tess. He's a billionaire in a hospital, which means he has an army of people who can help him. You're allowed to have boundaries." But Sophie was already grabbing her keys, already kissing Mia's forehead, already heading for the door because that's what she did. She showed up, she helped, she made herself useful enough to keep. 20 minutes, she told Tessa. Metropolitan General smelled like floor cleaner and fear. Sophie navigated the hallways with the same invisible efficiency she used at work, following the signs to the 8th floor. Room 847 sat at the end of a quiet corridor, and when she approached, she heard voices inside. Sharp voices. Angry voices. She recognized Marina's crystalline tone first. "This is absurd, Grant. You're being deliberately cruel." "I'm being honest." Grant's voice was weak but steady. "There's a difference." Sophie hesitated outside the door. Every instinct told her to turn around, to text Grant that she'd tried, to retreat back into invisibility where she belonged. But he'd asked her to come. He'd used that tone that meant he needed help, and Sophie had built her entire professional identity on being needed. She knocked softly. The voices inside stopped. "Come in," Grant called. Sophie pushed open the door and immediately wished she hadn't. The hospital room was crowded. Grant lay in the bed, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him, an IV in his arm and monitors beeping softly beside him. Marina stood at the foot of the bed in a cream Chanel suit that probably cost more than Sophie's monthly rent. And near the window, arms crossed and face twisted in barely concealed contempt, stood Jace Kincaid, Grant's son, the crown prince of Kincaid Industries, the man who'd once asked Sophie to get him coffee during a board meeting and then criticized her in front of everyone when she brought it 30 seconds too late. All three of them turned to look at her. "Sophie." Grant's face relaxed slightly. "Thank you for coming." Marina's eyes narrowed. "The assistant? Grant, what?" "Everyone sit down," Grant interrupted. His voice was quiet but commanded attention anyway. Years of running boardrooms had trained people to listen when he spoke, even from a hospital bed. "I have something to say, and I'm only saying it once." Sophie remained standing near the door, but Marina sank into the chair beside the bed with the careful grace of someone who knew she looked good even while sitting. Jace didn't move from his position by the window. Grant took a breath. The monitors beeped faster for a moment, then settled. "The Innovation Leader Award ceremony is Friday night," he began. Marina's face brightened. "Yes, we're so proud." "I'm not accepting it." The room went still. Jace pushed off from the wall. "What are you talking about?" "Dad, this is the most prestigious award in the industry. They're giving you a lifetime achievement recognition. You can't just—" "I'm not rejecting the award," Grant clarified. "I'm choosing who accepts it on my behalf, as is my right according to the ceremony guidelines." Sophie felt something cold unfurl in her stomach. She knew that tone. That was Grant's negotiation tone, the one he used right before he unveiled a strategy that would change the entire game. "Obviously, we'll accept it for you," Marina said smoothly. "Jace and I can give a lovely speech about your legacy." "No." The single word dropped like a stone into water. Marina blinked. "Excuse me?" "You won't be accepting the award," Grant said. "Neither will Jace." Jace's laugh was sharp and ugly. "Then who? Your golf buddy? Your lawyer?" Grant turned his head on the pillow and looked directly at Sophie. The cold in her stomach turned to ice. "Sophie Hart will accept the award on my behalf," Grant said clearly. "She'll give the speech, represent the company, and receive the honor." For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Marina stood so fast her chair skidded backward. "You cannot be serious." "I'm completely serious." "She's your assistant," Marina hissed, and Sophie flinched at the venom in that single word. "She fetches your coffee and files your papers. She has no business representing you at an event like this." "She does more for this company than you ever did," Grant said quietly. "More than Jace has, despite his fancy title." Jace's face flushed dark red. "I'm the VP of Operations." "You're a name on a door," Grant interrupted. "Sophie is the reason I can do my job. She's the reason deals get made and problems get solved and things actually work. She knows more about running this company than both of you combined." Sophie wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor, to evaporate, to be anywhere but in this room with these people staring at her like she'd personally betrayed them. "Mr. Kincaid," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe this isn't—" "Do you trust me, Sophie?" Grant asked. She met his eyes. They were tired, shadowed with pain, and something else she couldn't quite identify. But they were kind. They'd always been kind to her, even when the rest of the world wasn't. "Yes," she said. "Then trust me on this." He turned back to Marina and Jace. "The award recognizes innovation and leadership. It's supposed to honor the people who build things, who make things happen, not the people who inherited a name or divorced into money." Marina's perfect composure finally cracked. "How dare you?" "I dare because I'm lying in a hospital bed after a heart attack and I've had a lot of time to think about what matters." Grant's voice softened. "I built this company from nothing. I worked 60-hour weeks, sacrificed everything, and yes, I made mistakes. I wasn't there for our daughter when she needed me. I let work consume me. But through all of it, there were people who kept things running, People like Sophie, who show up every single day and do the work nobody sees. This is ridiculous, Jay snapped. She's nobody. She's a single mother working an assistant job because she couldn't do anything else. The words hit Sophie like a slap. Her ex-husband had said similar things during their divorce, that she was useless, talentless, only good for making coffee and looking pretty. She'd spent 3 years trying to believe he was wrong, but hearing it from Jace Kincaid made the old wound split open again. She's more than you'll ever be, Grant said, and his voice was ice. Which is exactly why I'm doing this. You think you deserve everything because of your last name. Sophie earned every bit of respect she has. Marina grabbed her handbag. We'll see what the board thinks about this. The board doesn't control who accepts my award, Grant replied. I do, and I've already notified the ceremony organizers. Sophie Hart is listed as my representative. It's done. Marina looked at Sophie with such pure hatred that Sophie actually stepped back toward the door. You think you're special, Marina said softly. You think because Grant noticed you, because he gave you this little moment of attention, that it means something. But you're just the flavor of the month, just like all the others. There were no others, Grant said wearily. Marina, we've been divorced for 8 years. Let it go. Come on, Mother. Jace put his hand on Marina's elbow. Let's leave him to his brilliant decision-making. They swept out of the room like a storm system, moving on to devastate other areas. Together for 5 years, Sophie. I think together for 5 years, Sophie. I think we're past formalities in private. Grant. She swallowed hard. I can't do this. I can't go to that gala and give a speech in front of all those people. I don't even own a dress nice enough for something like that. Yes, you can. He shifted slightly in the bed, wincing. And before you argue, let me explain something. That award? It's not really about me. It's about what I built, but more importantly, it's about recognizing that successful companies are built by everyone, not just the person whose name is on the building. But why me? Grant was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft with something that might have been regret. My daughter Emily died 3 years ago. Car accident. She was 26. He paused, and Sophie saw the grief cross his face like a shadow. The last conversation we had, she told me I'd spent my whole life caring about the wrong things, that I valued achievement over people, results over relationships. She said she barely knew me because I was always working, always chasing the next deal. Sophie's throat tightened. She'd known about Emily's death, everyone at the company had, but Grant never talked about it. I told myself I'd change, Grant continued, that I'd start paying attention to what mattered. And then I realized something. I'd been working side by side with someone who embodied everything I'd failed to see, someone who worked twice as hard as anyone else, who never complained, who made everyone around her better. Someone who raised a daughter alone while managing to keep my entire professional life organized. I'm just doing my job, Sophie whispered. You're doing everyone else's job too, Grant corrected. And nobody notices because that's how you prefer it. Invisible, unappreciated, safe. But I noticed, Sophie. I've noticed for years. And this award, it's my chance to make other people notice too. Tears burned behind Sophie's eyes. She blinked them back hard. What if I mess it up? What if I freeze on stage or say something stupid or, then you'll be human, Grant interrupted, which is more than most people at that gala can claim. He reached for the water cup on his bedside table, and Sophie automatically moved forward to help him, adjusting the straw so he could sip without straining. He smiled at the gesture. See? That's what I mean. You don't even think about it. Sophie helped him settle back against the pillows. How long do you have to stay here? Another few days. They want to monitor my heart, run some more tests. I'll be fine. He caught her doubtful expression. I will. I'm too stubborn to die in a hospital bed. The gala is in 3 days. I know, which is why you need to go home, call whoever you trust most, and let them help you prepare. Because you're going to walk into that ballroom and show everyone exactly who Sophie Hart is. Sophie wanted to argue, wanted to explain that she wasn't brave enough, wasn't strong enough, wasn't enough, period. But Grant was looking at her with such complete confidence that she couldn't find the words to refuse. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll do it. Thank you. Grant closed his eyes, suddenly looking exhausted. Now get out of here. I need to rest, and you need to start planning. Sophie was halfway to the door when he spoke again. Sophie? She turned back. You're going to be magnificent, he said quietly, even if you don't believe it yet. The hospital corridor seemed longer on the way out. Sophie's hands were shaking so badly that she had to stop and lean against the wall, forcing herself to breathe slowly, counting to 4 on each inhale and exhale like her therapist had taught her. A gala. A speech. Hundreds of people staring at her, judging her, wondering who this nobody thought she was. Her phone buzzed. Tessa. Mia is fed and happy. How's the boss? Sophie stared at the text, then typed back with trembling fingers. He wants me to accept his award at a gala on Friday. In front of everyone? Give a speech. The response came immediately. What? Then, coming over. We're handling this. Sophie drove home on autopilot, her mind spinning with everything that had just happened. Marina's contempt, Jace's casual cruelty, Grant's unexpected faith in her. The whole situation felt surreal, like she'd stumbled into someone else's life by mistake. When she opened her apartment door, Tessa was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with Mia, both of them drawing with crayons. Tessa looked up, took one look at Sophie's face, and immediately stood. Mia, baby, why don't you go pick out a movie to watch? But we're drawing. Movie. Now, please. Mia recognized that tone and scampered off to the living room. The moment she was out of earshot, Tessa grabbed Sophie's shoulders. Tell me everything. So Sophie did. She sank into a chair and let the whole story pour out. Grant's hospital bed, Marina's fury, Jace's insults, the award, the speech, all of it. Tessa listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, anger, and finally settling on fierce determination. That absolute legend, Tessa breathed when Sophie finished. Grant Kincaid is giving his ex-wife and his spoiled son the middle finger in the most elegant way possible, and you're the weapon he chose. I'm not a weapon. I'm a disaster waiting to happen. No. Tessa's voice went sharp. No, we're not doing this. We're not doing the thing where you decide you're not good enough before you even try. Tess, Sophie Marie Hart, listen to me. Tessa leaned forward, eyes blazing. For 5 years, you have worked your ass off at that company. You've managed every detail of Grant Kincaid's professional life. You've negotiated with suppliers, coordinated with executives, fixed problems before anyone even knew they existed. You know that company inside and out. I'm an assistant. You're the person who makes it all work, Tessa corrected, and everyone knows it except you. So Marina's pissed? Good, she should be. Her billionaire ex-husband just told the world that you matter more than she does. Sophie let out a shaky laugh. When you put it that way, that's the only way to put it. Tessa sat back, already pulling out her phone. Okay, 3 days. We can work with that. First thing, do you have any idea what kind of dress code this gala has? Black tie. It's at the Meridian Hotel, the ballroom that holds 800 people. Jesus. Tessa scrolled through her phone. Okay, my friend Rebecca works at a boutique downtown. High-end stuff, but she gives me deals. We'll go tomorrow morning, find you something perfect. I can't afford... Grant's company is paying you to represent him, right? That means you get a clothing allowance. Email HR tonight and tell them you need funds for appropriate formal attire for the gala. If they push back, tell them Grant personally requested you attend. Sophie blinked. Is that legal? It's absolutely legal. You're representing the company at a major industry event. They have to provide you with appropriate attire if you don't already own it. Tessa grinned. I dated a corporate lawyer for 6 months, picked up a few things. For the first time since leaving the hospital, Sophie felt a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. What about the speech? What about it? I have to write a speech about Grant, about the company, about innovation and leadership, and Tess, I don't know how to do that. Tessa reached across the table and grabbed Sophie's hand. Yes, you do. You know Grant better than anyone. You know what he's built, how he works, what he values. Just tell the truth. The truth is, I'm terrified. Then tell them that too. Tessa squeezed her fingers. Sophie, the whole point of this is that you're not like them. You're not some polished executive who's been giving speeches since boarding school. You're real. You're the person who actually does the work. That's exactly what makes you perfect for this. Mia appeared in the doorway, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. Mama, are you sad? Sophie's heart clenched. She opened her arms and Mia climbed into her lap, small and warm and utterly certain that her mother could fix anything. I'm a little nervous, baby, Sophie admitted. I have to do something scary on Friday night. What kind of scary? I have to talk in front of a lot of people. Mia considered this seriously. Like show and tell. Kind of, but with grown-ups. That's not scary, Mia announced. You're the bravest person I know. Sophie felt tears prick her eyes again. Oh, sweetie, I'm not… Yes, you are. Mia's voice was completely confident. You go to work even when you're tired. You make me breakfast even when you're sad. You read me stories even when your head hurts. That's brave. Tessa made a soft sound. Sophie buried her face in Mia's hair for a moment, breathing in the smell of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. You're right, Sophie whispered. Thank you for reminding me. That night, after Mia was asleep and Tessa had gone home, Sophie sat at her laptop and tried to write. The cursor blinked on the empty document, mocking her. Draft. Award Acceptance Speech. What did you say when accepting an award for someone like Grant Kincaid? How did you summarize a career that spanned decades, innovations that had changed entire industries, a legacy that would outlive them all? Sophie's fingers hovered over the keys. Then she thought about what Tessa had said. Tell the truth. She thought about Mia's words. You're the bravest person I know. She thought about Grant in that hospital bed, looking at her with complete faith. And slowly, Sophie began to type. I've worked for Grant Kincaid for 5 years, and most people don't know my name. The words came easier after that. Not polished, not perfect, but honest. Sophie wrote about what it meant to work behind the scenes, to be the person who made things happen without ever being seen. Came not just from one brilliant mind, but from teams working together. By the time she finished, it was 2 a.m. The speech wasn't long, maybe 5 minutes when spoken aloud, but it was true. Every word of it. Sophie read it over once, made a few minor edits, then saved the document and closed her laptop. 3 days. She had 3 days to transform from invisible assistant to public representative of one of the country's most successful entrepreneurs. 3 days to prove she was more than the coffee girl with delusions. 3 days to stop being invisible. Sophie looked at her reflection in the darkened laptop screen. Tired eyes, messy hair, pajamas that had seen better days, and made herself a promise. She would not shrink. She would not hide. She would walk into that ballroom and speak her truth, even if her voice shook. Because Grant believed in her, Tessa believed in her, Mia believed in her. And maybe, just maybe, it was time Sophie started believing in herself. To be continued. Wednesday morning arrived with rain drumming against Sophie's window and Mia singing off-key in the shower. Sophie lay in bed for an extra moment, staring at the water-stained ceiling and wondering if she could call Grant and tell him she'd changed her mind, that she was sick, that her car had broken down, that she'd been abducted by aliens and wouldn't be available for the foreseeable future. Then Mia appeared in the doorway, dripping wet with a towel wrapped around her like a cape. Mama, Aunt Tessa texted. She says to wear your good jeans and to drink coffee because you're going shopping and you need energy. Sophie couldn't help but smile. Did she text you directly? No, she texted you, but your phone was on the table and I saw it light up. Mia climbed onto the bed, leaving wet footprints on the comforter. Are you getting a princess dress? I don't think they make princess dresses for grown-ups, baby. Then what's the point of being grown-up? Mia asked, with such genuine confusion that Sophie laughed, really laughed, for the first time since yesterday. An hour later, Sophie stood outside Luminescence Boutique in downtown, her good jeans already soaked from the rain despite her umbrella. Through the window, she could see Tessa inside talking to a tall woman with silver hair cut in a sharp bob. The dresses on display looked like they cost more than Sophie's monthly salary. So Sophie pushed open the door, a small bell chiming above her head, and stepped into a world that didn't feel like it was meant for people like her. The boutique smelled expensive, like leather and jasmine and quiet wealth. Soft classical music played from hidden speakers. The dresses hung on the walls like works of art, each one illuminated by its own perfect spotlight. Sophie! Tessa grabbed her arm and pulled her forward. This is Rebecca. She's going to make you look like you own the entire world. Rebecca's smile was warm despite her intimidating elegance. Tessa's told me everything. Award ceremony at the Meridian, ballroom full of sharks, need to make a billionaire's ex-wife weep with envy. I love a good challenge. I don't know if I'd put it exactly like, that's exactly how I'd put it, Tessa interrupted. Marina Kincaid is going to see Sophie walk into that ballroom and realize she's been replaced by someone with actual substance. Rebecca circled Sophie slowly, her eyes assessing with professional precision. What's your budget? Sophie's stomach clenched. I talked to HR this morning. They approved $1,500 for the dress and accessories. She waited for Rebecca to laugh, to explain that $1,500 wouldn't even cover the cost of a sleeve in this place. But Rebecca just nodded thoughtfully. We can work with that. Tessa mentioned you want elegant, not flashy, something that says you belong there without trying too hard. Something that says she's better than all of them without saying a word, Tessa added. I just want to not look ridiculous, Sophie said quietly. Rebecca's expression softened. Honey, I've been dressing women for 20 years. You could show up in a paper bag and you wouldn't look ridiculous. You have good bones, natural grace, and, this is important, you actually look like a real person instead of a plastic surgery experiment. We're going to work with that. She disappeared into the back room and returned with an armful of dresses in blacks and deep jewel tones. Sophie stared at them with growing panic. I usually wear pants to work, and cardigans. Safe cardigans that don't draw attention. Well, tonight you're wearing a dress that will make people forget you were ever invisible, Rebecca said firmly. Try this one first. The first dress was black with an intricate beaded bodice. Sophie put it on in the dressing room and immediately felt like she was playing dress-up in her mother's closet. The beading was beautiful, but it felt wrong, too busy, too desperate to impress. No, Rebecca said the moment Sophie emerged. Next. The second dress was emerald green with a plunging neckline. Sophie took one look at herself in the mirror and shook her head so hard she nearly gave herself whiplash. Absolutely not. Agreed, Rebecca said. You're not a plunging neckline person. Next. They went through 7 dresses. Each one was beautiful in its own way, but none of them felt right. Sophie was starting to sweat despite the boutique's perfect air conditioning, her anxiety building with each rejected option. Maybe I should just wear my black work dress, she said desperately. It's plain, but it's appropriate. No. Tessa's voice was firm. You are not wearing your funeral dress to the event of your career. Rebecca, what else do you have? Rebecca studied Sophie for a long moment. Then something shifted in her expression. Wait here. She vanished into the back again. This time she was gone longer, and Sophie could hear the sound of hangers sliding on racks, boxes being moved. When Rebecca returned, she was carrying a single dress bag. I was saving this for someone special, Rebecca said. I think that's you. She unzipped the bag and pulled out a dress that made Sophie's breath catch. It was midnight blue, so dark it was almost black, but with depths of color that shifted in the light. The cut was simple, a fitted bodice with a modest neckline, a natural waist, and a skirt that flowed to the floor without being too full or too tight. The only embellishment was subtle beading along the shoulders that caught the light like stars. It's perfect, Tessa breathed. Sophie was afraid to touch it. I can't afford— It's within budget, Rebecca interrupted. The designer is a friend. She makes dresses for real women, not mannequins. Try it on. In the dressing room, Sophie slipped the dress over her head with trembling hands. The fabric was cool silk that whispered against her skin. The zipper went up smoothly, and when she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The dress fit like it had been made for her body specifically. It showed her figure without exposing too much, elegant without being stuffy, simple without being boring. The midnight blue brought out the color in her eyes and made her skin look luminous instead of pale and tired. Sophie stared at her reflection and felt something shift inside her chest. She looked like she belonged. When she stepped out of the dressing room, Tessa made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. Oh my God, Sophie, Rebecca was nodding with satisfaction. That's the one. Now we need shoes and a clutch, something simple. And we need to talk about hair and makeup. I don't really do makeup, Sophie admitted. Just mascara and lip gloss usually. That's fine for Tuesday mornings, Rebecca said. But Friday night, you're going to need a little more armor. I know someone who does makeup for events. She's reasonable and she's good. Want me to set up an appointment? Sophie wanted to say no. Wanted to retreat back into her safe world of mascara and lip gloss and invisibility. But she could feel Tessa watching her, could see her own reflection in the mirror still wearing that perfect dress, and she heard herself say, "Yes, please." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of decisions. Shoes. Simple black heels with ankle straps that would keep Sophie from falling on her face. A small clutch in black silk. A delicate silver necklace that Rebecca insisted on lending her because every dress needs one good piece of jewelry and you're not buying something you'll wear once. When they were done, Rebecca packaged everything carefully while Tessa handed over Sophie's corporate credit card with a flourish. "You're going to be stunning," Rebecca said as she handed Sophie the garment bag. "And for what it's worth, I think what Grant Kincaid did is incredible. My sister worked as an executive assistant for 30 years. Never got recognized, never got thanked. You go show them what you're worth." Sophie's throat tightened. "Thank you. For everything." Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets washed clean and gleaming. Tessa linked her arm through Sophie's as they walked to the car. "Feel better?" "Terrified in a slightly different way," Sophie admitted. "Now I have the dress. Now I have to actually go through with it." "You're going through with it," Tessa said firmly. "And tomorrow, we're practicing your speech until you can say it in your sleep." That evening, after Mia was tucked into bed, Sophie tried on the dress again in her tiny bedroom. She stood in front of the full-length mirror, the one that usually showed her exhausted faces and coffee-stained cardigans, and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her phone rang. Grant's number. "Hello? Sophie? How are you holding up?" Grant's voice sounded stronger than it had yesterday, and Sophie felt some of her tension ease. "I got a dress, shoes, the whole outfit." "Good. That's good." There was a pause. "I heard Marina called the office today. Tried to get my secretary to tell her what you were planning to say in the speech." Sophie's stomach dropped. "What did your secretary tell her?" "That it was none of her business and she should direct all questions to me." Grant's voice held a note of satisfaction. "Helen's been my secretary for 20 years. She doesn't intimidate easily." "Grant, I need to ask you something." Sophie sat down on the edge of her bed, still wearing the dress. "Why are you really doing this? And please don't tell me it's just about recognizing hard work." Silence on the other end of the line. Then Grant sighed. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" "Of course." "The day Emily died, I was in a board meeting. My phone rang, and I ignored it because we were in the middle of negotiations for a major acquisition. She called 3 times, and I sent every call to voicemail." His voice cracked slightly. "By the time I listened to the messages, she was already gone. She'd been trying to tell me she loved me, that she was proud of me despite everything, that she hoped we could have dinner soon and really talk." Sophie felt tears burning behind her eyes. "The last thing my daughter wanted was to connect with me, and I was too busy caring about profit margins to answer the phone." Grant cleared his throat. "I've spent 3 years trying to figure out how to honor her memory, and I realized she would have loved you, Sophie. You're everything she wanted me to see in people. Hardworking without being ruthless. Ambitious without stepping on others. Strong without forgetting to be kind." "I'm not that special," Sophie whispered. "You are. You just can't see it yet." Grant's voice steadied. "This award isn't really about me, Sophie. It's about sending a message to people like my son, like my ex-wife, like every entitled executive who thinks success means never acknowledging the people who make it possible. You're going to walk into that ballroom and show them what real value looks like. What if I let you down?" "You won't. You're not capable of it." He paused. "Now get some sleep. You have a big couple of days ahead of you." After they hung up, Sophie sat in the quiet of her bedroom for a long time, still wearing the midnight blue dress. Through the thin walls, she could hear her neighbor's television, the distant sound of traffic, the ordinary sounds of her ordinary life. Except her life wasn't ordinary anymore. In 2 days, she was going to step into a world of wealth and power and judgment, representing a man who believed in her more than she believed in herself. Sophie stood and carefully unzipped the dress, hanging it on the outside of her closet where she could see it. A reminder, a promise, a challenge. Then she opened her laptop and read through her speech one more time, making small adjustments, strengthening her words, preparing for battle. Thursday morning arrived too fast and too bright. Sophie had barely slept, her mind spinning through every possible disaster scenario. What if she tripped walking to the stage? What if her voice cracked during the speech? What if someone heckled her and she froze? But Tessa showed up at 9 a.m. sharp with coffee and determination. Speech practice. Now. We're doing this until you could recite it underwater while juggling. They practiced in Sophie's living room while Mia was at school. Sophie stood in front of the couch while Tessa sat like a hostile audience member, interrupting with impossible questions and loud coughs and all the chaos Sophie might face at the actual event. I've worked for Grant Kincaid for 5 years. Louder, Tessa barked. The people in the back can't hear you. Sophie took a breath and started again, projecting her voice. I've worked for Grant Kincaid for 5 years, and most people don't know my name. Why should we care? Tessa interrupted. What makes you so special? I'm not... Sophie stopped, recognizing the trap. This was what they'd practiced. I'm not special. That's exactly the point. I'm one of hundreds of people who work behind the scenes at Kincaid Industries, making sure the brilliant ideas actually become reality. Boring, Tessa yelled. It's not boring, Sophie shot back, feeling a flicker of real anger. It's the truth. Grant Kincaid is being honored tonight for innovation and leadership, but innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because assistants schedule the meetings, because engineers pull all-nighters solving problems, because operations teams coordinate across time zones, because someone makes sure the coffee is fresh at 6 a.m. when the ideas start flowing. Tessa grinned. Better. More fire. Keep going. They practiced for 3 hours straight. By the end, Sophie's voice was hoarse, but stronger. She could recite the speech without looking at her notes. She'd learned how to pause for effect, how to make eye contact, how to speak with conviction even when her hands were shaking. You're ready, Tessa finally announced. Now we need to talk about tomorrow morning. What's tomorrow morning? Your makeup appointment. Rebecca's friend Jasmine is meeting you at 9. She's going to do your makeup and show you how to touch it up before the event. Tessa held up a hand before Sophie could protest. It's already paid for. Grant's company covered it as part of your appearance fee. Appearance fee? You're representing the company at a major industry event. That comes with compensation beyond your normal salary. Didn't HR explain that? Sophie shook her head, feeling overwhelmed again. Tessa's expression softened. Sophie, you need to understand something. You're not just Grant's assistant doing him a favor. You're an official representative of Kincaid Industries at one of the most prestigious events in the business world. That means you get compensated accordingly. The dress, the makeup, even a small stipend for your time. It's all standard. I don't feel standard. I feel like an imposter. Good. Tessa's smile was fierce. Let them underestimate you. Let them look at you and think you don't belong. And then you get up on that stage and prove every single one of them wrong. That afternoon, Sophie picked up Mia from school. Her daughter bounced into the car full of energy and stories about art class, but she stopped mid-sentence when she saw Sophie's face. Mama, are you still nervous about tomorrow? A little bit, baby. Mia was quiet for a moment, her small face serious. Then she reached over and patted Sophie's hand with the grave importance only a 6-year-old could muster. It's okay to be scared. My teacher says being brave means doing things even when you're scared. Sophie felt her heart crack open. Your teacher is very smart. I think you're braver than anyone, Mia continued, because you do scary things every day and you never complain, not even when the bills come and you look sad, or when you're really tired but you still read me stories, or when Mrs. Peterson from downstairs is mean about the noise and you just smile and say sorry, even though I know you want to yell at her. How do you know I want to yell at her? Because I want to yell at her, Mia said matter-of-factly. But you're always nice instead. That's the bravest thing ever. Sophie had to pull the car over because her eyes were too blurry with tears to drive safely. She turned in her seat and pulled Mia into a hug, breathing in the smell of playground dust and strawberry shampoo. I love you so much, Sophie whispered. I love you too, Mama. And tomorrow night, everyone's going to see how amazing you are, just like I already know. That night, Sophie laid out everything for the next day with military precision. The dress hung in her bathroom so the steam from her shower would release any wrinkles. The shoes sat by the door. Her clutch was packed with tissues, lip gloss, and the note cards with her speech printed in large font just in case her mind went blank. She read the speech one final time before bed, her voice barely above a whisper in the dark apartment. I've worked for Grant Kincaid for 5 years, and most people don't know my name. I schedule his meetings, manage his calendar, coordinate his travel, and yes, I make his coffee. I'm one of hundreds of people who work behind the scenes at Kincaid Industries, and until this week, I preferred it that way. Being invisible felt safe. Sophie paused, touching the paper with her fingertips. But Grant taught me something important. The people who build things, who make things work, who show up every day and do the quiet work that nobody sees, those people deserve to be recognized. Not because they're special or extraordinary, but because they're essential. This award isn't just about one man's achievements. It's about everyone who contributed to those achievements, everyone who believed in the vision, everyone who turned ideas into reality. Her voice grew steadier. So tonight, I accept this award on behalf of Grant Kincaid, yes, but also on behalf of every assistant who ever felt invisible, every worker who wondered if their contribution mattered, every person who was told they were just anything. You're not just anything. You're the foundation, and Grant wants you to know that he sees you even when others don't. Sophie set down the note cards and turned off the light. Tomorrow night, she would stand in front of hundreds of people who thought she didn't belong and speak those words out loud. She would face Marina's contempt and Jace's sneers and the whispers of strangers who wondered who she thought she was. And she would do it anyway, because Mia believed she was brave, because Tessa refused to let her hide, because Grant had given her a chance to prove that invisible didn't mean worthless. Sophie closed her eyes and tried to sleep, her heart pounding with fear and anticipation and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Friday morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect autumn day that felt like a gift. Sophie woke before her alarm, her stomach already twisting with nerves. The makeup appointment was in 2 hours. The gala started at 7. She had approximately 10 hours until her entire life changed. Tessa arrived with Mia's favorite breakfast, chocolate chip waffles from the diner down the street, and a plan. I'm taking Mia to my place after school, she announced. That gives you time to get ready without worrying about childcare. My neighbor's daughter is babysitting. She's 16 and very responsible. You can pick Mia up tomorrow morning and tell her all about your triumph. What if it's not a triumph? Sophie asked quietly. What if it's a disaster? Then it's a disaster and we eat ice cream and plot revenge, Tessa said cheerfully. But it's not going to be a disaster. You're going to be magnificent. There was that word again. Magnificent. Sophie didn't feel magnificent. She felt like she might throw up. But she got dressed, kissed Mia goodbye with promises to tell her everything tomorrow, and drove to the address Tessa had given her for Jasmine's studio. Jasmine turned out to be a woman in her 40s with purple streaks in her hair and the kind of calm, competent energy that immediately put Sophie at ease. Her studio was small but immaculate, with a makeup chair positioned in front of perfect lighting and mirrors. So, Jasmine said, gesturing for Sophie to sit. Rebecca told me about the dress. Midnight blue, simple elegance, making a billionaire's ex-wife cry. I love everything about this. Despite her nerves, Sophie laughed. Does everyone know my entire story? Only the important parts. Jasmine began examining Sophie's face with professional focus. Good bone structure, clear skin, just a little tired around the eyes, easily fixed, natural lip color, which is great because we can go subtle there. Are you comfortable with false lashes? I've never worn them. Then we'll skip them. You don't need them anyway. Jasmine started laying out brushes and palettes. Here's my philosophy. Makeup should enhance who you are, not cover it up. We're not creating a mask, we're just turning up the volume a little so the people in the back row can see you clearly. For the next hour, Jasmine worked with steady hands and gentle instruction. She showed Sophie how to blend foundation so it looked like skin, how to contour without looking like she'd been attacked by a bronzer, how to make her eyes look bigger and more awake without looking overdone. This is your power color, Jasmine said, sweeping a dusty rose across Sophie's cheeks. Works with your skin tone in the dress. Makes you look alive and healthy without being too pink. When Jasmine finally turned the chair around so Sophie could see the mirror, Sophie barely recognized herself, but in a good way. She looked polished and professional, but still like herself. Her eyes looked bigger, her cheekbones more defined, her lips fuller. But it wasn't dramatic or scary. It was just Mordi. Oh, Sophie breathed. Exactly. Jasmine smiled with satisfaction. Now, I'm going to teach you how to do touch-ups, and I'm sending you home with this lipstick and powder compact. If you get shiny or your lipstick fades, just blot and reapply. Don't try to fix anything else, or you'll make it worse. She walked Sophie through the basics, making her practice until she was confident. Then Jasmine packed everything into a small bag and handed it over. You're going to be amazing tonight, she said, and I want pictures. Back at her apartment, Sophie had 4 hours until she needed to leave for the Meridian Hotel. 4 hours that felt simultaneously too long and not nearly long enough. She made herself eat toast and tea, nothing that would upset her nervous stomach. She laid out the dress one more time, checking for any imperfections. She practiced her speech twice more, pacing her living room in her regular clothes, making sure the words still felt right. At 5 o'clock, she started getting ready. The dress slid over her body like water, the silk cool against her skin. The shoes fit perfectly. The borrowed necklace settled at her collarbone, catching the light. Sophie stood in front of her bathroom mirror and stared at the woman looking back at her. She looked elegant, professional, like she belonged in ballrooms accepting awards. She looked nothing like the invisible assistant who made coffee and filed reports and kept her head down. Sophie's phone buzzed. A text from Grant sent from the hospital. You're going to be extraordinary. Make them see what I see. Another text, this one from Tessa. Go show them who Sophie Hart really is. I'm so proud of you. And one more, from a number she didn't recognize. It took her a moment to realize it was from Rebecca at the boutique. That dress was meant for you. Go shine. Sophie took a deep breath, picked up her clutch, and walked out of her apartment into the hallway. Mrs. Peterson from downstairs was getting her mail and stopped dead when she saw Sophie. Oh my, the older woman breathed. Sophie, you look stunning. Where are you going? To a gala, Sophie heard herself say. I'm accepting an award on behalf of my boss. Well, Mrs. Peterson smiled, and it was genuine. They're lucky to have you. The drive to the Meridian Hotel passed in a blur. Sophie's hands were steady on the wheel, but her heart was racing. She pulled up to the valet stand, an expense she never would have considered before. But tonight she was representing Kincaid Industries, and she needed to arrive like she belonged. The valet opened her door and offered his hand. Sophie took it, stepping out of her practical sedan in her midnight blue dress, and felt the evening air cool against her skin. The Meridian rose above her, all glass and steel and old money elegance. Light spilled from the entrance, and Sophie could see people in evening wear moving through the lobby. She recognized some of them from business magazines, from news articles, from the world she observed but never participated in. Sophie clutched her small purse and walked toward the entrance, her heels clicking against the marble with each step. The doorman held the door open with a small nod of respect. Good evening, miss. Good evening, Sophie managed and stepped inside. The lobby was magnificent. Soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, marble floors that gleamed like mirrors. Signs directed guests to the Innovation Leader Award ceremony in the Grand Ballroom. Well, look who actually showed up. Well, look who actually showed up. Sophie turned slowly. Marina Kincaid stood near the ballroom entrance in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than Sophie's car. Her hair was swept into an elegant updo, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. She looked like old money and cold beauty. Everything Sophie could never be. But Marina's eyes were hard as stone, and her smile was all edges. I have to admit, Marina continued, her voice pitched just loud enough for nearby guests to hear, I'm impressed by your audacity. It takes real nerve to walk into a room like this when everyone knows you don't belong. Sophie felt her carefully constructed confidence begin to crack. But before she could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Marina, still compensating for personality deficits with expensive jewelry, I see. Tessa appeared at Sophie's elbow like an avenging angel in emerald green, her expression sweet but her eyes deadly. Marina's smile tightened. I don't believe we've met. No, you wouldn't remember me. I'm nobody important, just Sophie's family, but I remember you from the photos. Tessa looked Marina up and down with exaggerated assessment. Though you look different in person, more desperate. Sophie's heart hammered. This was not how tonight was supposed to start. Marina's face flushed. You have no idea who you're talking to. Oh, I know exactly who you are. You're the woman who married money and still ended up bitter. Tessa linked her arm through Sophie's. Now, if you'll excuse us, my cousin has an award to accept. I'm sure that must be difficult for you to watch. Tessa steered Sophie toward the ballroom entrance before Marina could respond, moving with the kind of confidence Sophie desperately wished she possessed. Once they were out of earshot, Tessa leaned close. Breathe. She's rattled because she knows Grant chose you over her. That makes you dangerous. I'm not dangerous, Sophie whispered. I'm terrified. Good. Channel it. Tessa squeezed her arm. I'll be in the audience. Second row, right side. When you feel like you're drowning up there, look at me. I'll be the one giving Marina dirty looks. They reached the ballroom entrance and Sophie's breath caught. The grand ballroom was enormous. Easily 800 people spread across dozens of round tables, each one covered in white linens and decorated with elaborate centerpieces. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm light across the room. A stage dominated the far end with a podium and a massive screen showing the event logo. This was real. This was happening. In less than an hour, Sophie would stand on that stage in front of all these people and speak. You've got this, Tessa whispered. Remember, you're not here to impress them. You're here to tell the truth. Then Tessa disappeared into the crowd, leaving Sophie standing alone at the entrance to the ballroom, her midnight blue dress catching the light, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. A woman with a clipboard approached, her smile professional and warm. Sophie Hart, I'm Elizabeth Chen, event coordinator. We're so glad you're here. Let me show you to your table. You're seated at the head table with the other award recipients and board members. The head table. Of course, because Sophie wasn't just attending, she was part of the program. She followed Elizabeth through the maze of tables, feeling eyes track her progress. Whispers followed in her wake. Who is that? Grant Kincaid's assistant, apparently. I heard she's accepting his award. Can you imagine? She's wearing a Juliana Chen original. Those don't come cheap. Sophie kept her eyes forward, her chin up, channeling every ounce of courage Mia had given her. The head table was positioned near the stage, and Sophie recognized several faces from business magazines. The CEO of Tech Vision, the founder of Catalyst Ventures, people whose decisions shaped entire industries, and in 15 minutes she would stand among them and speak. Elizabeth showed Sophie to her seat, between an empty chair reserved for Grant and a board member named Harold Winters, who gave her a polite nod. Sophie sat carefully, adjusting her dress, placing her clutch in her lap with trembling hands. This was it, the point of no return. Across the ballroom, she spotted Tessa in the second row, exactly where she'd promised to be. And near the back, Sophie caught a glimpse of Marina, already seated and watching the head table with barely concealed fury. The lights dimmed slightly, the murmur of conversation quieted. A man in a tuxedo stepped to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 30th Annual Innovation Leader Awards. Sophie's hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she stayed in her seat, hands folded in her lap, and waited for her name to be called. The MC's voice carried across the ballroom with practiced ease, welcoming guests and introducing the evening's agenda. Sophie barely heard the words. Her entire world had narrowed to the feeling of her heart hammering against her ribs and the weight of hundreds of eyes that would soon turn toward her. Harold Winters leaned over slightly, his voice low and kind. First time at one of these? Sophie managed a nod, not trusting her voice. They're terrifying, Harold said with unexpected honesty. I've been coming for 15 years and I still get nervous. But here's the secret. Nobody in this room is actually paying attention to anyone but themselves. They're too worried about how they look, who they're sitting with, whether their speech will land. You could recite the phone book up there and half of them wouldn't notice. It should have been comforting. Instead, it made Sophie realize that even when she stood on that stage, she'd still be invisible to most of them, just in a different way. The first award was announced, Excellence in Sustainable Innovation. A woman in a silver gown walked to the stage with perfect confidence, her heels clicking rhythmically against the floor. She accepted her crystal trophy, delivered a polished 3-minute speech about green technology and corporate responsibility, and returned to her seat to enthusiastic applause. Sophie's palms were sweating, She pressed them against her dress, trying to dry them discreetly. The second award, the third. Each recipient more polished than the last, each speech more rehearsed. Sophie watched them and felt her confidence crumbling. These were people who had spent their entire lives in rooms like this, who knew how to command attention, who belonged. Then the MC's voice shifted, taking on a more serious tone. Our next award is one of the evening's most prestigious honors, the Lifetime Achievement Award, recognizing an individual whose contributions have fundamentally shaped our industry over decades of innovation and leadership. Sophie's breathing went shallow. This year's recipient is Grant Kincaid, founder and CEO of Kincaid Industries. Under Grant's leadership, Kincaid Industries has revolutionized supply chain management, pioneered 3 major technological platforms, and maintained a company culture that values both innovation and integrity. Applause rippled through the ballroom. Sophie saw several people at nearby tables nodding, some standing. Grant was respected here, genuinely admired. The weight of representing him suddenly felt crushing. Unfortunately, Grant cannot be with us tonight due to a medical situation, the MC continued, and Sophie heard murmurs of concern spread through the crowd. But he has chosen someone very special to accept this award on his behalf. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Sophie Hart, Grant's executive assistant, and the person he credits with being the operational backbone of Kincaid Industries. The spotlight swung toward the head table, blindingly bright. Sophie's entire body went rigid. This was it. This was the moment. She stood, her legs trembling so badly she was certain everyone could see. The clutch slipped from her lap, and Harold caught it smoothly, handing it back with an encouraging nod. Sophie took it with numb fingers and turned toward the stage. The walk across the ballroom floor was the longest of her life. Every step felt precarious in her heels. The spotlight followed her, making it impossible to see the audience clearly, which was probably a mercy. She could feel their attention now, heavy and assessing. The whispers started immediately. That's his assistant? She's so young. Is she even qualified to... Look at Marina's face. Priceless. Sophie kept her eyes on the stage, on the podium waiting for her. Don't trip, don't fall, don't embarrass Grant. The mantra repeated with each step. She reached the stairs leading up to the stage and gripped the railing, climbing carefully. The MC stood at the podium holding a stunning crystal award that caught the light like a diamond. He smiled at her, professional and warm, and Sophie felt a flicker of gratitude for his kindness. Sophie Hart, everyone, he said into the microphone, prompting another round of applause. He handed her the award, heavier than she'd expected, solid and real in her hands, and stepped aside. Sophie stood alone at the podium, the microphone in front of her, 800 people watching from the darkness beyond the spotlight. For a terrifying moment, her mind went completely blank. Every word of her carefully practiced speech vanished like smoke. She looked down at the award in her hands, at the engraved plaque that read Grant Kincaid, Lifetime Achievement Award, Innovation Leader Awards. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished crystal, distorted and small. Then, from somewhere in the second row, she heard Tessa's voice cut through the silence. "You've got this, Sophie." It was inappropriate. It broke every rule of formal event etiquette, and it was exactly what Sophie needed. She looked up, found the general direction of Tessa's voice, and felt something steady click into place inside her chest. She set the award carefully on the podium, adjusted the microphone with trembling hands, and began to speak. "I've worked for Grant Kincaid for 5 years, Sophie said, her voice quieter than she'd intended. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. "I've worked for Grant Kincaid for 5 years, and most people don't know my name." Someone in the audience laughed, not cruelly, but with recognition. Sophie latched onto that sound like a lifeline. "I schedule his meetings, manage his calendar, coordinate his travel, and yes, I make his coffee." She paused, letting that sink in. "I'm one of hundreds of people who work behind the scenes at Kincaid Industries, and until this week, I preferred it that way. Being invisible felt safe." The ballroom had gone very quiet. Sophie could feel the shift in attention, people leaning forward slightly, curious now instead of dismissive. "But Grant taught me something important." Her voice was getting stronger, more steady. "The people who build things, who make things work, who show up every day and do the quiet work that nobody sees, those people deserve to be recognized, not because they're special or extraordinary, but because they're essential." A man at a table near the front nodded. Sophie saw it through the spotlight and felt her confidence grow another inch. This award recognizes Grant's lifetime of innovation and leadership, and he absolutely deserves that recognition. He's brilliant, visionary, and dedicated in ways most people can't imagine. But Grant would be the first to tell you that he didn't build Kincaid Industries alone. Sophie gripped the edges of the podium, her knuckles white but her voice clear. He built it with engineers who spent nights solving impossible problems, with operations teams who coordinated across 12 time zones to make sure products shipped on schedule, with customer service representatives who turned angry clients into loyal partners, with administrative staff who kept everything running smoothly while everyone else focused on the big picture. She could see faces in the front rows now, her eyes adjusting to the light. Some people were nodding, some looked thoughtful. And in the back she caught a glimpse of Marina's face, tight with poorly concealed fury. Grant chose me to accept this award because he wanted to make a point, Sophie continued. Not about me specifically, but about what we value in business, in innovation, in leadership. We celebrate the people at the top, the CEOs, the founders, the visionaries, and we should. But we often forget that those achievements stand on a foundation built by people whose names never make it into the spotlight. Her voice cracked slightly on the next words, emotion breaking through despite her best efforts. Grant's daughter Emily died 3 years ago. She was brilliant and kind, and she spent her last conversation with her father trying to tell him she loved him. But Grant was in a meeting. He was busy building his empire, chasing his next innovation, and he missed that call. He's lived with that regret every day since. The ballroom was absolutely silent now. Sophie could hear her own breathing in the microphone. Emily would have wanted her father to see the people around him, really see them. Not as tools or resources, but as human beings with their own dreams and struggles and worth. Grant asked me to stand here tonight because he's trying to honor his daughter's memory by doing better, by acknowledging that success is a collective effort, not a solo performance. Sophie picked up the Crystal Award, holding it so it caught the light. So I accept this award on behalf of Grant Kincaid, yes, but I also accept it on behalf of every assistant who ever felt invisible, every worker who wondered if their contribution mattered, every person who was told they were just anything. Her voice rose with conviction. You're not just anything. You're the foundation, and Grant wants you to know that he sees you, even when others don't. Sophie set the award back down and gripped the podium again, her prepared speech complete, but words still pushing to get out. I'm terrified standing up here, she admitted, her voice softer but still steady. I'm scared I'll say the wrong thing, or trip walking off this stage, or somehow embarrass the company I work for. But you know what? That fear is worth it, because maybe, just maybe, someone else in this room who feels invisible will see me up here and realize that their work matters too, that they matter too. She took a breath, looking out at the sea of faces. Thank you for this honor. Thank you for celebrating not just Grant's achievements, but the principle behind them, that great things are built by many hands, not just one. And thank you to Grant for having the courage to make this choice, even knowing it would be controversial. Sophie stepped back from the podium, her entire body shaking with adrenaline and relief and disbelief that she'd actually done it. For one horrible second, there was silence. Then a single clap echoed from the second row. Tessa, standing now, applauding with fierce pride on her face. Another clap joined hers. Then another. Harold Winters rose to his feet at the head table, applauding steadily. The woman who'd won the Sustainability Award stood, then more people, rising like a wave spreading across the ballroom. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet. The applause built and built, filling the enormous space with sound. Sophie stood frozen at the podium, the Crystal Award in her hands, tears threatening to spill from her eyes as she watched hundreds of people. People who moments ago had whispered about her, doubted her, dismissed her, give her a standing ovation. The MC returned to the stage, his own eyes suspiciously bright, and took the microphone. Sophie Hart, everyone. Let's hear it one more time for Sophie and for Grant Kincaid. The applause surged again. Sophie managed a shaky smile, clutching the award to her chest, and walked carefully down the stage stairs. Her legs felt like water, but somehow they carried her back across that endless ballroom floor to her seat at the head table. Harold Winters pulled out her chair for her, leaning close as she sat. That was extraordinary, truly. I've been coming to these events for 15 years and I've never heard anything like that. Sophie couldn't speak. Her throat was too tight, her emotions too raw. She just nodded and set the crystal award carefully on the table in front of her, her hands still trembling. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. More awards were presented, more speeches given, but Sophie barely registered any of it. Her mind kept replaying the moment when the applause had started, when she'd realized they weren't mocking her, they were actually moved by what she'd said. When dinner was served, an elaborate three-course meal that Sophie couldn't taste, people from nearby tables kept catching her eye and nodding with respect. A woman she didn't recognize leaned over from the next table. "I'm an executive assistant at Meridian Technologies," she said quietly. "Thank you for what you said up there. I've been doing this job for 12 years and tonight's the first time anyone's acknowledged that we matter." Sophie felt tears threaten again. "We do matter. We keep everything running." "Now if only our bosses understood that," the woman said with a wry smile. As dessert was being served, some elaborate chocolate creation Sophie couldn't begin to appreciate, her phone buzzed in her clutch. A text from Grant. "Helen recorded it and sent me the video. Sophie, you were perfect, better than perfect. Emily would have loved you." Sophie excused herself from the table, murmuring something about the restroom to Harold. She made it to the lobby before the tears finally came, ducking into a quiet corner near the coat check and pressing her hand over her mouth to muffle the sobs. She'd done it. She'd actually done it, and Grant was proud of her. "Well, isn't this touching?" Sophie's head snapped up. Marina stood 5 feet away, her champagne-colored gown pristine, her expression carved from ice. "You must be so pleased with yourself," Marina continued, her voice soft but venomous, playing the poor invisible worker, tugging at heartstrings, making everyone feel guilty for not noticing the help. Sophie straightened, wiping her eyes quickly. "I wasn't playing anything. I meant every word I said." "Oh, I'm sure you did." Marina took a step closer. "But let's not pretend this is about honoring workers or whatever nonsense you spouted up there. This is about Grant publicly humiliating me and Jace by choosing his secretary over his own family." "I'm not trying to replace anyone," Sophie said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Grant made his choice for his own reasons. His reasons being that he's a sentimental fool who thinks grand gestures fix broken relationships." Marina's smile was all edges. "Do you know why our marriage ended, Sophie? Because Grant couldn't separate work from life. Because he valued his precious company more than his own daughter. And now he's using you, using Emily's memory, to make himself feel better about failing as a father." The words hit like physical blows. Sophie felt her confidence wavering. "That's not... He's trying to honor her. He's trying to assuage his guilt," Marina interrupted sharply. "And you're the prop he's chosen for his redemption arc. How sweet. The poor single mother, working so hard, deserving recognition. It's a lovely story, very marketable. Stop it." Sophie's voice came out stronger than she'd expected. "Stop trying to make this ugly. Grant chose me because he genuinely values the work I do. Because he understands that companies are built by everyone, not just executives. If that threatens you, threatens me," Marina laughed, cold and bright. "Darling, you couldn't threaten me if you tried. You're a temporary curiosity, a feel-good moment for Grant to feel noble. But in 6 months, a year, you'll still be making coffee, while people like me shape the actual world." Before Sophie could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Mother, what are you doing?" Jace Kincaid approached from the ballroom entrance, his tuxedo perfect, his expression a mix of irritation and embarrassment. He looked at Sophie with something that might have been pity or contempt. It was hard to tell. "I'm having a conversation," Marina said coolly. "You're making a scene." Jace glanced around the lobby, where several people were pretending not to watch. "People are already talking. Don't make it worse." Marina's jaw tightened. "Your father chose this woman over you, over us. Don't you have anything to say about that?" Jace looked at Sophie for a long moment. His eyes were Grant's eyes, the same color, the same shape, but without any of Grant's warmth. "I think Dad made his point," Jace said finally. "Whether we agree with it or not, it's done." The whole industry watched her give that speech, and half of them are probably drafting blog posts about the importance of recognizing support staff as we speak. "So you're just going to accept this?" Marina demanded. "What choice do I have?" Jace's voice carried an edge of bitterness. Fight it publicly and look like a spoiled brat who can't handle his father choosing someone else? That would really help my career. He turned his attention fully to Sophie, and she fought the urge to step back. You gave a good speech, Jace said, and it sounded like an accusation. Very heartfelt, very authentic. The people in this industry love that kind of thing. The underdog narrative, the invisible worker rising up. I'm sure you'll get plenty of attention from it. I didn't do it for attention, Sophie said quietly. No, you did it because my father asked you to. Jace's smile didn't reach his eyes. But you have to know what this looks like, right? The young assistant, the divorced billionaire, the dramatic choice to exclude his own family. People are going to talk. Sophie felt heat rise in her cheeks. There's nothing between Grant and me except a professional relationship based on respect. I'm sure that's true, Jace said smoothly. But perception is reality in this world. And the perception is that you've somehow convinced my father that you're more valuable than his own son. Maybe you should ask yourself why that perception exists, Sophie shot back, surprising herself with her boldness. Maybe it has nothing to do with me and everything to do with how you've treated your own father. Jace's expression hardened. Careful, you're not in the ballroom anymore. There's no spotlight, no applause. Just you and the people who actually belong in this world. Jace? Marina's voice was sharp. That's enough. Let's go. But Jace wasn't done. He took a step closer to Sophie, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. You think tonight changed something, he said softly. You think one speech makes you important, makes you matter. But you're still just an assistant, still just someone who fetches coffee and schedules meetings. And when my father gets bored of his guilt-driven philanthropy project, you'll go right back to being invisible. Sophie met his eyes and saw the fear beneath his cruelty. Jace wasn't angry that she'd been chosen. He was terrified that his father saw more value in a stranger than in his own son. And that terror made him mean. I'm sorry you feel threatened, Sophie said, keeping her voice level. But I'm not your enemy. I've never tried to come between you and Grant. If you feel distant from your father, maybe that's something you should discuss with him instead of taking it out on me. Jace's face flushed dark red. How dare you? Jace, now. Marina grabbed her son's arm and pulled him toward the exit. We're leaving. This isn't over, Jace said, jerking his arm free, but following his mother anyway. You're going to regret— Goodbye, Jace, Sophie interrupted firmly. Tell Marina I said goodnight. She turned and walked back toward the ballroom, her heart pounding, but her head held high. Behind her, she heard Marina's angry whisper and Jace's sharp response. But she didn't look back. Tessa intercepted her at the ballroom entrance, eyes wide. I saw Marina corner you. Are you okay? Do I need to fight someone? Because I will absolutely fight someone for you. Despite everything, Sophie laughed. No fighting, but I could use some air. They slipped out a side door to a small terrace overlooking the city. The night was cool, the distant sound of traffic a soft hum beneath them. Sophie gripped the railing and let out a long, shaky breath. That was the most terrifying thing I've ever done, she said. The speech or standing up to Marina and Jace? Both. All of it. This entire night. Sophie turned to face Tessa. Did I really do it? Did that actually just happen? You gave a standing ovation-worthy speech in front of 800 people, made a billionaire's ex-wife furious, and told his entitled son to get over himself. Tessa's grin was fierce and proud. Yeah, Sophie, you really did it. Sophie felt something crack open in her chest, the tight, fearful place she'd been protecting for so long. And instead of fear rushing in, she felt something that might have been pride. I told the truth, she said wonderingly. I stood up there and said exactly what I wanted to say, and people listened. People didn't just listen, they understood. They felt it. Tessa grabbed Sophie's hands. Do you know how many people came up to me after you walked off stage? How many assistants and coordinators and invisible workers wanted to know who you were? You started something tonight. Sophie's phone buzzed again. More texts flooding in, from colleagues at Kincaid Industries, from people she'd never met who'd gotten her number somehow, all saying variations of the same thing. Thank you. That mattered. You spoke for all of us. This is so surreal, Sophie whispered. This is you finally getting the recognition you deserve. Tessa pulled her into a hug. I'm so proud of you. Mia's going to lose her mind when she hears about this. Mia, Sophie's daughter who thought she was the bravest person in the world, Sophie couldn't wait to tell her about tonight, to show her that sometimes being brave meant standing in the spotlight instead of hiding from it. They stayed on the terrace for a few more minutes, letting Sophie's adrenaline settle before heading back inside. The ceremony was wrapping up, people beginning to gather their things and say their goodbyes. Sophie needed to collect the crystal award from the head table before someone accidentally broke it. But as she crossed the ballroom, at least a dozen people stopped her. Executive assistants from other companies, operations managers, even a few CEOs who wanted to shake her hand and tell her the speech had resonated. One older woman with kind eyes and expensive jewelry pressed a business card into Sophie's palm. "I run a leadership development program for support staff," she said. "I'd love to have you speak at our next conference. We need voices like yours." Sophie stared at the card, overwhelmed. "I'm not a speaker. You're exactly what we need," the woman interrupted gently. "Think about it." Harold Winters was waiting at the head table with the award carefully wrapped in tissue paper. "I took the liberty of having them package this up for you," he said. "Didn't want you trying to juggle it in those heels." "Thank you." Sophie took the package carefully. "For everything. You were kind when you didn't have to be." "Kindness should never be conditional," Harold replied. "And for what it's worth, what you said tonight needed to be said. I've spent my entire career in executive positions, and I've never once stopped to thank my assistant properly. I'm going to change that." Sophie felt tears threaten again. That would mean a lot to her, I'm sure. As she turned to leave, Harold called out once more. "Sophie, Grant made the right choice. I hope you know that." Sophie nodded, not trusting her voice, and headed for the exit where Tessa was waiting. The valet brought her car around, and Sophie slid into the driver's seat, the wrapped crystal award secure in the passenger seat beside her. Tessa leaned down through the window. "You good to drive? You're not going to crash from emotional exhaustion?" "I'm good," Sophie assured her. "Better than good, actually. Text me when you get home." "And Sophie?" Tessa's voice softened. "Tonight proved something you've always struggled to believe. You're not invisible unless you choose to be. And I think you just chose to be seen." Sophie drove home through quiet streets, the city lights blurring past her window. The adrenaline was finally fading, leaving her exhausted but strangely peaceful. She'd faced her fears, she'd spoken her truth, she'd stood up to people who wanted her to shrink, and she'd survived. More than survived, she'd succeeded. When Sophie pulled into her apartment building's parking lot, she sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the crystal award glinting in the streetlight. Tomorrow she'd pick up Mia and tell her everything. Tomorrow she'd call Grant at the hospital and thank him properly. Tomorrow she'd figure out what came next. But tonight, Sophie just wanted to savor this feeling, the knowledge that she'd been brave, that she'd mattered, that she'd finally stepped into the light and found she could bear it. She carried the award up to her apartment, kicked off her heels in the hallway, and collapsed onto her couch, still wearing the midnight blue dress. Her phone buzzed with one final text. Grant's number again. "You changed lives tonight, Sophie, including your own. I'm proud to know you." Sophie read the words 3 times, each time feeling them settle deeper into her heart. Then she set her phone aside, closed her eyes, and let herself believe them. Sophie woke the next morning still wearing the midnight blue dress, the crystal award sitting on her coffee table catching the early sunlight. For a disoriented moment, she thought the entire evening had been a dream. Then her phone buzzed with another flood of messages, and she knew it had all been devastatingly, wonderfully real. She peeled herself off the couch, every muscle aching from tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying, and stumbled to the shower. The hot water felt like absolution, washing away the fear and doubt and leaving something cleaner behind. When she emerged, wrapped in her oldest bathrobe with her hair dripping wet, she finally allowed herself to look at her phone properly. 43 text messages. 17 missed calls. Her email inbox had exploded with over 200 new messages. Sophie sat down hard on her bed, scrolling through the deluge with growing disbelief. Messages from coworkers she barely knew congratulating her. Emails from industry publications requesting interviews. A voicemail from the woman who ran the leadership development program, reiterating her invitation to speak. Even a message from Rebecca at the boutique, saying the dress looked even better on Sophie than she'd imagined. And did Sophie want to keep it at a discounted price? But the message that made Sophie's hands shake was from an unknown number with a simple subject line. business opportunity. She opened it hesitantly. Ms. Hart, my name is Patricia Chen, and I run Catalyst Consulting, specializing in organizational development and corporate culture transformation. Your speech last night articulated something I've been trying to help companies understand for years, that sustainable success requires valuing everyone, not just leadership. I'd like to discuss the possibility of you consulting with us on a project basis, helping companies develop better support systems for their administrative and operational staff. Your unique perspective would be invaluable. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Best regards, Patricia. Sophie read the email 3 times, each time certain she'd misunderstood. Someone wanted to hire her as a consultant? Her, who'd spent 5 years perfecting the art of being invisible? Her phone rang, Tessa's number. Please tell me you're awake and looking at all these messages, Tessa said immediately, without preamble. Because, Sophie, you're kind of famous right now. I'm not famous. That's ridiculous. There are 3 articles about you already. The assistant who stole the show. Invisible no more. Sophie Hart's powerful message. And my personal favorite, Grant Kincaid's best decision, choosing substance over status. Tessa's voice was vibrating with excitement. Do you understand what this means? You didn't just give a good speech. You started a conversation. Sophie felt panic rising in her chest. I can't handle this right now. I need to pick up Mia and tell her that her mama is a superhero, Tessa interrupted, which she already knew, but now the rest of the world knows it too. After they hung up, Sophie forced herself to get dressed in her normal clothes, jeans and a soft sweater, nothing that would draw attention. She needed to feel like herself again, not like the woman in the midnight blue dress who'd commanded a ballroom. That woman was powerful and brave. This woman, the real Sophie, was just trying to navigate a world that had suddenly become far more complicated. She drove to Tessa's apartment to collect Mia, her mind spinning through everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. The gala felt like it had occurred in another lifetime, to another person entirely. Mia burst out of Tessa's door the moment Sophie knocked, practically vibrating with excitement. Mama, Aunt Tessa showed me the video. You were on a stage in front of everyone and you didn't even look scared. Sophie scooped her daughter into her arms, breathing in the familiar smell of strawberry shampoo and childhood. I was terrified, baby. I was just good at hiding it. That's what brave means, Mia said seriously, pulling back to look at Sophie with those knowing 6-year-old eyes. Doing scary things anyway. Tessa appeared in the doorway with a knowing smile. She's been practicing a speech of her own. Apparently she's going to tell her class about her famous mother on Monday during show and tell. I'm not famous, Sophie protested weakly. You're famous to me, Mia announced, and that's what matters. The simple truth of it made Sophie's throat tight. Her daughter was right. What mattered wasn't the articles or the attention or the business opportunities. What mattered was that Mia had watched her mother face her fears and win. That was the real legacy of last night. They spent Saturday quietly, just the 2 of them. Sophie made pancakes for lunch and they watched Mia's favorite movie twice. They colored at the kitchen table and played board games and did all the normal, beautiful things that made up their life. But Sophie's phone kept buzzing with messages she couldn't ignore forever. On Sunday morning, she finally called Grant at the hospital. Sophie, his voice sounded stronger, more like himself. I was hoping you'd call. How are you feeling? Overwhelmed, grateful, terrified? Sophie laughed shakily. All of the above? That sounds about right. She could hear the smile in Grant's voice. I've been watching the coverage. You've made quite an impact. Grant, I have to ask, did you know this would happen? That it would get this much attention? There was a pause. I hoped it would start a conversation. I didn't expect it to explode quite like this. Grant's voice softened. But I'm not sorry it did. You deserve this recognition, Sophie. You've earned it. People want to interview me. Someone offered me a consulting position. I don't know how to handle any of this. You handle it the same way you handled the speech, honestly and on your own terms. Grant coughed slightly, then continued. I'm being released from the hospital tomorrow. I'd like you to take the rest of the week off. Paid, obviously. You need time to process everything and decide what comes next. What comes next? Sophie repeated. What do you mean? I mean your life just changed, Sophie. You have options now that you didn't have before. Opportunities. and I want you to take the time to consider them properly without worrying about work." Sophie's stomach clenched. "Are you firing me?" "What? No." Grant sounded genuinely shocked. "Sophie, I'm offering you space to breathe and think. If you want to stay at Kincaid Industries as my assistant, that job is yours for as long as you want it. But if you want to explore other opportunities, I'll support that too. You're not trapped anymore. That's what I'm trying to tell you." The word settled over Sophie like a blanket, comforting and terrifying in equal measure. She wasn't trapped. She had choices. After years of feeling like she was barely surviving, she suddenly had options. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." "You're going to do extraordinary things," Grant said quietly. "I'm just glad I got to be part of the beginning." Monday morning arrived with the sharp clarity that comes after making a decision. Sophie had spent Sunday night going through every email, every opportunity, every request, and one kept pulling at her attention: Patricia Chen's consulting offer. She called the number in the email, her heart pounding. Patricia answered on the second ring, her voice warm and professional. "Sophie Hart, I'm so glad you called." "I wanted to learn more about the opportunity," Sophie said carefully. "I'm not sure I'm qualified for consulting work, but I'm interested." "Let me tell you what I see," Patricia said. "I've been working in organizational development for 20 years. I help companies improve their culture, their efficiency, their employee satisfaction. And the biggest blind spot I encounter repeatedly is how they treat their support staff, assistants, coordinators, administrative professionals. These people are essential but undervalued, and it creates dysfunction throughout the entire organization." Sophie found herself nodding even though Patricia couldn't see her. "Your speech articulated that problem perfectly," Patricia continued, "but more than that, you've lived it. You understand both sides, what it's like to be invisible and what it's like to work for someone who actually sees you. That perspective is invaluable. I don't need you to be a polished consultant with an MBA. I need you to be authentic and help companies understand what they're missing." "What would it actually involve?" Sophie asked. "Initially, a few hours a week. You'd sit in on my client meetings, share your perspective, help develop training materials. We'd start small and see how it goes. The pay is competitive. Actually, it's quite good. And it would be flexible around your schedule with your daughter." Sophie closed her eyes, trying to imagine it. A job where she'd be valued for her perspective instead of her ability to make coffee. Work that could help change how other people in her position were treated. The possibility of building something more than just a career, a real impact. "I'd like to try," Sophie heard herself say, "if you're willing to take a chance on someone with no consulting experience." "I'm willing to take a chance on someone who had the courage to speak truth to power in front of 800 people," Patricia replied warmly. "How about we meet for coffee this week and discuss the details?" They set a time for Wednesday. After hanging up, Sophie sat in her quiet apartment and let the magnitude of it all wash over her. She was keeping her job with Grant, security and stability for Mia, but she was also stepping into something new, something that scared her and excited her in equal measure. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unfamiliar number. "This is Jace Kincaid. We need to talk. Meet me at Meridian Coffee at 2 p.m. today." Sophie stared at the message, her stomach knotting. The last time she'd seen Jace, he'd been threatening her in the lobby of the Meridian Hotel, his face twisted with anger and fear. What could he possibly want now? She should ignore it, should delete the message and pretend it never arrived. But curiosity and something else, maybe the lingering bravery from Friday night, made her type back a response. "I'll be there." Meridian Coffee was one of those deliberately upscale cafes where a simple latte cost $8 and the furniture looked uncomfortable on purpose. Sophie arrived 10 minutes early and ordered a regular coffee, refusing to be intimidated by the menu full of obscure roasts and preparation methods. Jace arrived exactly at 2, wearing business casual that probably cost more than Sophie's monthly car payment. He looked tired, with shadows under his eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. When he spotted Sophie, something flickered across his face. Not quite regret, but maybe acknowledgement. "Thank you for coming," he said, sitting down across from her without ordering anything. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Sophie admitted. "What do you want, Jace?" He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the table in a nervous gesture that reminded her painfully of Grant. "I want to apologize," Jace said finally, "for what I said Friday night. It was cruel and unfair, and he stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. And it came from a place of hurt that had nothing to do with you. Sophie hadn't expected that. She'd braced herself for more threats, more anger, not this raw honesty. Why hurt? She asked quietly. Jace laughed bitterly. Because my father chose you, a stranger, someone he's known for 5 years. And he didn't even consider choosing me, his own son. He met her eyes. Do you have any idea how that feels? To know that your parent values someone else more than they value you? I'm not trying to replace you, Sophie said. I never wanted... I know. Jace cut her off, but not unkindly. I know that logically, but it doesn't change how it feels. My entire life, I've tried to earn my father's respect. I went to the right schools, got the right degree, took a position at his company. And I'm still not good enough, still not what he wants. Sophie thought about Mia, about the fierce love she felt for her daughter, about how she'd do anything to make sure Mia never felt unloved or unworthy. Have you told Grant how you feel? She asked. We don't really talk, Jace admitted. Not about real things, just business, surface level. Ever since Emily died, it's like there's this wall between us. He retreated into work and I didn't know how to reach him. So you got angry instead, Sophie said, understanding clicking into place. You turned that hurt into resentment. Wouldn't you? Jace's voice was defensive. He has a daughter who worships him and he ignored her until she died. He has a son who's desperate for his approval, and he chooses his assistant over him for a major honor. What was I supposed to do? Smile and accept it? Sophie thought about her own father, who'd left when she was 8 and never looked back. About the years she'd spent wondering if she'd done something wrong, if she was somehow unlovable. She understood Jace's pain more than he knew. You're supposed to talk to him, Sophie said firmly. Not yell, not accuse, but actually talk. Tell him you feel unseen. Tell him you want a real relationship, not just a professional one. Give him a chance to fix it. He won't listen. Grant is lying in a hospital bed after a heart attack, thinking about mortality and regrets, Sophie countered. If there was ever a time when he might actually listen, it's now. Jace was quiet, staring at his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, almost vulnerable. Did he talk about me? After the award ceremony? Sophie's heart ached for him. He talked about wanting to honor Emily's memory, about recognizing the people who get overlooked. It wasn't about rejecting you, Jace. It was about sending a message to the industry. A message that made me look like an entitled brat who doesn't deserve recognition, Jace said flatly. Or a message that made people question whether we're valuing the right things in business, Sophie offered. It doesn't have to be about you at all. Jace looked at her with something that might have been respect. You really believe that, don't you? That it was about the principle, not about punishing us. I know Grant, he's not cruel, he's just... Sophie searched for the right words. He's trying to fix something that's been broken for a long time. And sometimes fixing things means making uncomfortable choices. Jace stood abruptly, pulling out his wallet and dropping a 20 on the table, even though neither of them had ordered anything beyond Sophie's coffee. I can't promise I'll suddenly be okay with all of this, he said. But I'll think about what you said, about talking to him. That's all anyone can ask, Sophie replied. Jace turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, your speech was good, really good. I was angry and jealous, and I said terrible things, but that doesn't change the fact that you earned that standing ovation. He left before Sophie could respond, disappearing into the midday crowd on the sidewalk outside. Sophie sat alone with her cooling coffee and the $20 bill, processing the strange vulnerability of their conversation. Her phone rang. Patricia Chen. Sophie, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I just got off a call with a potential client, a major tech company dealing with high turnover in their administrative staff. They want someone to come in and assess their culture, make recommendations, and I immediately thought of you. Sophie's pulse quickened. Me? Patricia, I haven't even started working with you yet. I know, but they saw the articles about your speech. They specifically asked if you'd be willing to be part of the assessment team. They're offering quite a substantial fee. How substantial? Patricia named a figure that made Sophie's head spin. For 2 weeks of work, interviewing staff, observing operations, providing recommendations, she'd make nearly half of what she earned in a year at Kincaid Industries. I can't, Sophie said automatically. I don't know what I'm doing. I'll mess it up. Or you'll provide exactly the perspective they need, Patricia countered. Sophie, I'll be there with you every step of the way. You won't be alone in this. But these companies need to hear from someone who's lived the experience, not just studied it. Will you at least think about it? Sophie thought about Mia, about the future she wanted to build for her daughter, about the cramped apartment and the bills that arrived with clockwork regularity, about the possibility of doing work that actually mattered, that could help people like her feel seen and valued. I'll do it, Sophie said. But I need you to be honest with me. If I'm terrible at this, if I'm not what they need, you have to tell me. Deal, Patricia said warmly. I'll send over the details. Sophie, I have a feeling you're going to be very good at this. Wednesday's meeting with Patricia was held at a sleek downtown office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Patricia herself was exactly what Sophie had imagined from their phone conversations. Put together and professional, but with laugh lines around her eyes, and an easy warmth that put Sophie immediately at ease. So here's how I see this working, Patricia said, spreading papers across the conference table. The tech company, they're called Innovate Tech, has been hemorrhaging administrative staff. Their average tenure for executive assistants is 18 months. They can't figure out why they can't retain talent. Let me guess, Sophie said dryly. They pay well but treat their assistants like interchangeable parts. Patricia's smile was knowing. Exactly. They're baffled because they offer competitive salaries and good benefits. They don't understand that money isn't everything. Money matters when you're struggling to pay rent, Sophie said carefully. But respect matters more in the long run. If you're paid well but treated like you're disposable, eventually you leave. That's precisely the insight they need. Patricia handed Sophie a folder. This is background on the company. I want you to review it. Think about what questions you'd ask their staff, what you'd want to observe. We go in next Monday for a full week of assessment. Sophie opened the folder and started reading. Innovate Tech was a mid-sized company specializing in AI development, with about 300 employees and aggressive growth plans. Their CEO was a 35-year-old wonderkin named Marcus Webb, who'd been featured in every tech publication imaginable. He's gonna hate me, Sophie said, looking at a photo of Marcus. Confident smile, expensive suit, the unmistakable air of someone who'd never questioned their own importance. He's going to be challenged by you, Patricia corrected, which is exactly what he needs. Marcus is brilliant at technology and terrible at people. His company is suffering because of it. They spent 3 hours going over the plan, with Patricia walking Sophie through assessment methodologies and interview techniques. By the end, Sophie's head was spinning with information, but she felt something like excitement building in her chest. You're a natural at this, Patricia said as they wrapped up. You ask the right questions. You see patterns. You're going to do great. Sophie drove home in a daze, her mind already spinning through everything she'd learned. When she picked up Mia from after-school care, her daughter took one look at her face and grinned. You look happy, Mama. I am happy, Sophie realized. I'm scared and excited and overwhelmed, but I'm happy. Because of the new job? Because I'm doing something that matters, Sophie corrected. Something that might help other people who feel invisible. Mia considered this seriously. Like you used to feel? Like I used to feel, Sophie confirmed, but not anymore. That evening, after Mia was in bed, Sophie called Grant. He'd been released from the hospital and was recovering at home, against his doctor's wishes to take it easy. I took the consulting job, Sophie told him. I'm keeping my position with you, but I'm also going to start working part-time with Patricia Chen. That's wonderful, Grant said, and he sounded genuinely pleased. I'm proud of you for taking the chance. I'm terrified I'll fail. You won't. Grant's confidence was absolute. And even if you stumble, you'll learn from it. That's what matters. Grant, I need to tell you something. Sophie took a breath. Jace came to see me. We talked. He's hurting. And I think a lot of his anger comes from feeling like you don't see him. There was a long silence on the other end. When Grant spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. I know. I've known for years. I just didn't know how to fix it. Talk to him, Sophie said gently. Really talk to him. Not about business or the company, but about how you both feel. It's not too late, Grant. Emily tried to tell me the same thing, Grant said quietly, that I was losing Jace by not reaching out, by staying behind my work. I didn't listen to her. Maybe I'll listen to you. Do it for yourself, Sophie urged. Do it because you love your son and you don't want to lose him too. After they hung up, Sophie sat in the quiet of her apartment and felt the weight of everything shifting around her. Her life was changing in ways she couldn't have imagined 2 weeks ago. She was stepping into a new career, taking risks, speaking up instead of staying silent. But more than that, she was learning that being seen came with responsibility. People were looking to her now. Mia, other assistants who felt invisible, even Jace in his own way. She couldn't shrink back into safety anymore. On Thursday, Sophie returned to Kincaid Industries for the first time since the gala. She'd expected awkwardness, maybe some resentment from colleagues who might think she'd gotten too big for her position. Instead, she was greeted with applause when she stepped off the elevator. Helen, Grant's secretary, was the first to approach. "About damn time someone said what you said," Helen declared, pulling Sophie into a fierce hug. "I've been working here for 20 years, and that's the first time anyone acknowledged that we keep this place running." Other assistants and coordinators stopped by Sophie's desk throughout the day, sharing their own stories of feeling invisible, thanking her for speaking up. A few even asked advice about how to handle difficult bosses or advocate for themselves. Sophie felt the weight of it, being a symbol of something bigger than herself. It was terrifying and empowering in equal measure. Grant called her into his office late in the afternoon. He looked tired but healthier than he had in the hospital, and his eyes were clear and focused. "I talked to Jace this morning," he said without preamble. "We're having dinner next week. A real conversation, not a business meeting." Sophie felt relief wash over her. "I'm glad. I'm not sure it'll fix everything," Grant admitted. "We have years of distance to overcome. But you were right. It's not too late to try." He paused. "Sophie, I want you to know something. When I chose you to accept that award, I knew it would create waves. I knew Marina would be furious and Jace would feel hurt. I did it anyway because I believed the message was important enough to risk those consequences." "I know," Sophie said, "but I also did it because I believed in you," Grant continued, "because I thought you were capable of handling everything that came after. And I was right. You've handled it with more grace than I could have hoped for." Sophie felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you for giving me the chance." "Thank you for taking it." Grant smiled. "Now go home to your daughter. Tomorrow's Friday, and I know you have a big weekend ahead, preparing for your new consulting work. We'll manage here without you." Sophie gathered her things and headed for the elevator, feeling the eyes of her co-workers following her with a respect that was new and still slightly uncomfortable. As she waited for the doors to close, she caught her reflection in the polished steel, no longer invisible, no longer afraid. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Sophie reviewed Innovate Tech's materials until she could recite their org chart from memory. She practiced interview questions with Tessa, playing the role of difficult employees. She bought a new notebook and organized her thoughts into categories: culture observations, retention issues, respect, and recognition gaps. On Sunday night, Mia climbed into Sophie's lap while she was reviewing notes at the kitchen table. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Mia asked. "Very nervous," Sophie admitted. "I've never done anything like this before." "But you did the speech and that was scary too," Mia pointed out with 6-year-old logic. "And you were amazing at that." Sophie hugged her daughter tight. "How did you get so wise?" "I pay attention," Mia said seriously, "to everything, especially to you." Monday morning, Sophie dressed in her most professional outfit, not the midnight blue dress, but a tailored black pantsuit that made her feel competent and serious. She dropped Mia at school with extra kisses and promises to tell her everything that evening. Patricia met her in the lobby of Innovate Tech's building, her expression calm and confident. "Ready?" Patricia asked. Sophie took a deep breath. "Ready?" They rode the elevator to the executive floor in silence. When the doors opened, they were greeted by Marcus Webb himself, younger in person than his photos, with nervous energy that manifested in constant motion. "Patricia, great to see you again, and you must be Sophie Hart." Marcus extended his hand. "I have to say that speech of yours really resonated. My assistant actually sent it to me with a pointed message about company culture." Sophie shook his hand firmly. "I'm looking forward to learning more about Innovate Tech and how we can help." Marcus led them to a conference room where his leadership team was assembled, 6 executives, all looking vaguely uncomfortable. Sophie recognized the expression. They knew something was wrong, but they didn't want to admit their part in it. Patricia took the lead, explaining the assessment process. But when she asked Sophie to share her initial thoughts, the room went quiet. Sophie looked around the table at these successful, confident people who'd probably never questioned whether they belonged in a room. And she thought about all the assistants who were struggling downstairs, feeling invisible and undervalued. "I'd like to start by interviewing your administrative staff," Sophie said clearly. "Not with you present, just one-on-one conversations where they can speak freely about their experiences here." One of the executives shifted uncomfortably. "Is that really necessary? We can tell you about our culture." "You can tell me what you think your culture is," Sophie corrected gently. "But the people on the front lines will tell me what it actually is. There's usually a gap between those two things." Marcus leaned forward, his expression intent. "That's exactly the kind of honest assessment we need. Make it happen." And just like that, Sophie was working. Really working. Not making coffee or scheduling meetings, but doing something that mattered, that could create real change. As she followed Patricia out of the conference room to begin the interviews, Sophie caught her reflection in a glass wall and barely recognized herself. She stood taller now, walked with purpose, met people's eyes instead of looking down. She wasn't invisible anymore, and she was finally beginning to understand that she never really had been. She'd just been waiting for permission to be seen. That permission had come in the form of Grant's faith, Tessa's fierce support, Mia's unwavering belief, and most importantly, her own courage to step into the light. And now, there was no going back. The first assistant Sophie interviewed at Innovate Tech was a woman named Kara, 28 years old, with dark circles under her eyes, that spoke of too many late nights and too little appreciation. She sat across from Sophie in a small conference room, hands folded tightly in her lap, clearly expecting this to be another waste of time. "I want you to be completely honest," Sophie said, setting down her pen to show she wasn't there to record evidence against anyone. "Nothing you say leaves this room in a way that could be traced back to you. I'm not here to get anyone in trouble. I'm here to understand what's really happening." Kara studied Sophie's face, searching for sincerity. Whatever she found there made her shoulders drop slightly. "I've worked here for 14 months, Kara said quietly. "I'm the third assistant my boss has had in 2 years. The other 2 quit without notice." "Why did they leave?" "Same reason I'm probably going to leave." Kara's voice was flat, resigned. "Because no matter how hard you work, how many hours you put in, how many fires you put out, you're still just the person who gets blamed when things go wrong and ignored when things go right." Sophie knew that feeling in her bones. "Tell me about a typical day." What followed was a litany of small indignities that added up to a toxic work environment. Executives who scheduled meetings without checking their assistants' carefully maintained calendars, then blamed the assistants when conflicts arose. Bosses who demanded weekend availability but considered it presumptuous when assistants asked for time off. A culture that measured value solely by how much revenue someone generated, which meant support staff were inherently expendable. "Last week, my boss took credit for a presentation I'd spent 20 hours putting together," Kara said, her voice cracking slightly. "In front of the whole executive team. He didn't even acknowledge that I'd done the work, just presented it like he'd stayed up all night creating slides." "Did you say anything?" Kara laughed bitterly. "And risk being labeled difficult? Being the next one fired for not being a cultural fit? No. I just smiled and went back to my desk and updated my resume." Sophie interviewed 8 more assistants over the next 3 days. Each story was different in its details, but devastatingly similar in its themes. Smart, capable people who were treated like office furniture. Workers who went above and beyond but were never recognized. Human beings who felt invisible in a company that prided itself on innovation. By Wednesday afternoon, Sophie had compiled pages of notes and a growing anger at the casual cruelty of it all. She and Patricia sat in a coffee shop near Innovate Tech's office, reviewing findings before their presentation to Marcus and his leadership team. "It's worse than I expected," Patricia said, reading through Sophie's observations. "The turnover makes sense now. They're not losing people because of money or benefits. They're losing them because working here slowly erodes your sense of self-worth." "So what do we tell them?" Sophie asked. "How do we make executives who've never been invisible understand what that feels like?" Patricia smiled. "We tell them the truth. We show them exactly what they're doing wrong, and we give them a choice: change or keep hemorrhaging talent until the company collapses from the inside. The presentation was scheduled for Thursday morning. Sophie barely slept Wednesday night, rehearsing what she wanted to say, trying to find the words that would make these successful, confident people understand that their success was built on the backs of people they'd never bothered to see. Mia found her at the kitchen table at 6 in the morning, still in her pajamas, surrounded by notes. "Mama, you're going to be great," Mia said with absolute certainty. "You always are." Sophie pulled her daughter into her lap. "How do you know?" "Because you care," Mia said simply. "About people. About being fair. About making things better. That's what makes you great." Sophie held her daughter close, breathing in her certainty and innocence, and felt some of her anxiety ease. Mia was right. Sophie cared. That had to count for something. The leadership team assembled in the main conference room at 9 sharp. Marcus sat at the head of the table, flanked by his executives, all of them wearing expressions of polite interest that didn't quite mask their defensiveness. Patricia handled the opening, walking through their methodology and key findings. Then she turned to Sophie. Sophie is going to share the qualitative data, the stories and observations from your staff that help explain the numbers. Sophie stood, her notes in hand, and looked around the table at these powerful people who were about to hear some uncomfortable truths. "I interviewed 9 of your administrative staff members over the past 3 days," Sophie began. "I'm not going to share their names or specific identifying details because they trusted me to protect their anonymity, but I am going to share what they told me about working here." She walked them through it systematically. The missed recognition, the casual dismissals, the way assistants were blamed for executive mistakes but never credited for executive successes. The culture of availability that demanded assistants be reachable at all hours but treated their personal time as worthless. The lack of career development or growth opportunities. One executive interrupted halfway through. "These sound like individual management issues, not systemic problems. Maybe we just have a few bad bosses." "You have a culture that enables bad bosses," Sophie corrected firmly. "When 8 out of 9 people I interviewed told similar stories, that's not coincidence. That's pattern." Marcus leaned forward. "What would you recommend we do differently?" Sophie took a breath. This was the moment that mattered. "You need to fundamentally shift how you value support staff. Not with lip service or token gestures, but with real structural change. Create career paths for administrative professionals so they're not trapped in dead-end positions. Implement recognition programs that acknowledge contributions beyond revenue generation. Train your executives on how to actually manage and support their assistants instead of just extracting labor from them." "That sounds expensive," another executive said. "Do you know what's expensive?" Patricia interjected. "Replacing an assistant every 18 months. Recruitment costs, training time, lost institutional knowledge, decreased productivity while new hires get up to speed. You're hemorrhaging money on turnover. This isn't about being nice. It's about being smart." Sophie pulled out her final note. "One of your assistants told me something that I think sums up the core problem. She said, 'I could handle the long hours and the difficult work if I just felt like they saw me as a person instead of a tool.' That's what this comes down to. Your staff doesn't need you to be perfect. They need you to see them." The room was quiet. Marcus stared at the table, his expression troubled. One of the executives, a woman named Jennifer who ran the engineering division, spoke up. "I think I've been one of those bad bosses." Her voice was quiet but steady. "I've treated my assistant like a resource to be optimized instead of a person to be valued. I didn't even realize I was doing it." "Recognition is the first step," Sophie said gently. "Change is the second." They spent 2 more hours discussing specific recommendations and implementation strategies. By the time the meeting ended, Marcus had committed to a comprehensive review of their administrative staff policies and a personal pledge to meet with every assistant in the company to understand their experiences. "Thank you," Marcus said to Sophie as they were packing up, "for being honest even when it was uncomfortable. We needed to hear this." Sophie shook his hand. "Your assistants needed you to hear it. I just gave them a voice." Patricia and Sophie left Innovate Tech together, walking out into the autumn sunshine with the satisfaction of work well done. "You were brilliant in there," Patricia said. "Confident, clear, uncompromising. Sophie, I want to make this partnership permanent, not just project-based, but a real business relationship. I think we could do incredible work together. Sophie felt a surge of pride and possibility. I'd like that. As long as I can maintain my position with Grant, he gave me this chance. I won't abandon him. I wouldn't expect you to, Patricia assured her. Loyalty like yours is rare. But Sophie, you need to start thinking about your own future too. What do you want to build? Where do you want to be in 5 years? The question lodged itself in Sophie's mind and stayed there for the rest of the day. What did she want? For so long, she'd been focused on survival, keeping her job, paying her bills, raising Mia. She'd never allowed herself to dream bigger than that. But now, sitting in her car outside Mia's school, waiting for dismissal, Sophie let herself imagine. A consulting practice that helped companies treat their people better. Maybe eventually her own firm, built on the principle that everyone deserves to be seen. Financial stability that meant she could give Mia opportunities Sophie had never had. A life where she wasn't just surviving, but actually thriving. It felt dangerous to want that much, but it also felt right. Mia burst out of the school building full of energy and stories, climbing into the car with her backpack trailing behind her. Mama, guess what? I told everyone about your speech, and Miss Rodriguez said you sound very brave, and can you come to Career Day next month and talk about your job? Sophie laughed, pulling her daughter into a hug. My job where I make coffee and schedule meetings? No, your job where you help people and make things better, Mia corrected seriously. That's your real job. Out of the mouths of 6-year-olds, Sophie thought. Yes, baby, I can come to Career Day. That evening, after Mia was in bed, Sophie's phone rang. Grant's number. I heard the Innovate Tech presentation went well, Grant said. Marcus called me this afternoon. Apparently you made quite an impression. Sophie felt a flutter of nerves. You know Marcus? Old friends from business school. He wanted my perspective on whether he should hire Patricia's firm long-term for culture transformation. I told him he'd be a fool not to. Grant paused. Sophie, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about the future of Kincaid Industries, about succession planning and what comes next. Sophie's heart sank. You're retiring. Eventually, yes. Not immediately, but within the next few years. The heart attack was a wake-up call. Grant's voice was thoughtful. I've been working for 40 years. I've built something I'm proud of, but I've also sacrificed relationships and missed moments I can't get back. I want to spend whatever time I have left actually living, not just working. What about Jace? Sophie asked carefully. Jace and I had dinner last night. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Grant's voice grew thick with emotion. He told me he feels like he's spent his whole life competing with a ghost for my attention, with the version of himself he thinks I want instead of the person he actually is. What did you say? I told him I was sorry, that I'd been a terrible father, too focused on building an empire to notice I was losing my son. And then I asked him what he actually wants out of life, not what he thinks he's supposed to want. Sophie held her breath. And? He doesn't want to run Kincaid Industries, Grant said quietly. He never did. He only pursued it because he thought it would make me love him. What he actually wants is to teach business ethics at the university level. He has a passion for helping young entrepreneurs understand the human cost of success. Sophie felt tears prick her eyes. That's wonderful, Grant. It is, and it's also terrifying because it means I need to figure out succession in a different way than I'd planned. Grant paused. Sophie, I'm going to be making some big changes over the next year to the company's structure, to my role, to how we operate. I wanted you to know that through all of it, you'll have a place here for as long as you want it. But I also want you to know that you don't need Kincaid Industries anymore. You could build something entirely your own if you wanted to. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. I don't know if I'm ready for that, Sophie admitted. You weren't ready to give a speech in front of 800 people either, Grant pointed out. But you did it anyway. Sophie, you're capable of more than you realize. I've known that for years. I'm just glad you're finally starting to see it too. After they hung up, Sophie sat in the quiet darkness of her living room, processing everything. Her life was changing so fast she could barely keep up. 2 weeks ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was building a consulting practice, considering her future, being offered opportunities she'd never dreamed possible. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. Friday brought a surprise visitor to Kincaid Industries. Sophie was at her desk, working through email, when Helen buzzed her. "You have someone here to see you. She says her name is Marina Kincaid." Sophie's stomach dropped. "Send her back." Marina appeared in her doorway moments later, still immaculate in designer clothes, but something in her expression was different. Softer, maybe. Or just tired. "May I come in?" Marina asked, and the politeness was so unexpected that Sophie could only nod. Marina sat in the chair across from Sophie's desk, her posture perfect, but her hands fidgeting slightly with her handbag. "I owe you an apology," Marina said without preamble. "For the things I said at the gala, for how I've treated you, for—" She stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "For being cruel when you didn't deserve it." Sophie had imagined this moment 100 times, had rehearsed the cutting things she might say. But looking at Marina now, she saw something she'd missed before. A woman who'd built her entire identity around being Grant Kincaid's wife and hadn't known who she was when that was taken away. "Why are you really here?" Sophie asked gently. Marina's composure cracked slightly. "Because my son called me yesterday and told me he's not taking over the company, that he's choosing a different path. And I realized that I've been so busy being angry at Grant for moving on that I've been holding Jace back from living his own life." "You wanted him to inherit the company," Sophie said, understanding clicking into place. "I wanted him to have what I lost when Grant and I divorced," Marina admitted. "Power, prestige, relevance. I thought if Jace became CEO, I'd still be connected to it all somehow, still matter." She met Sophie's eyes. "But watching you at that gala, hearing you talk about being invisible and finding your worth, I realized I've been trying to be visible through my son instead of finding my own purpose." Sophie's heart ached for her. "What do you want, Marina? Not for Jace, not to prove something to Grant. What do you actually want?" Marina was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. I've been Mrs. Grant Kincaid, and then Grant's ex-wife, and then Jace's mother pushing him toward greatness. I've never just been Marina." "Then maybe it's time to figure out who Marina is," Sophie said softly. Marina dabbed at her eyes with a tissue from her expensive handbag, careful not to smudge her makeup. "I don't know how to do that." "The same way anyone does. Try things. Fail at some, succeed at others. Give yourself permission to be imperfect." Sophie paused. "And maybe stop measuring your worth by your proximity to powerful men." A surprised laugh escaped Marina. "When did you get so wise?" "When I stopped being invisible," Sophie replied. "It turns out you learn a lot when you're actually participating in life instead of just observing it." Marina stood, smoothing her skirt. "Thank you for not being cruel. You would have been justified." "Cruelty doesn't fix anything," Sophie said. "I learned that from someone who chose kindness when he didn't have to." After Marina left, Sophie sat at her desk, feeling the strangeness of it all. 2 weeks ago, Marina had been her enemy, the embodiment of everything Sophie wasn't. Now she was just another woman trying to figure out who she was beyond the roles others had assigned her. Maybe they weren't so different after all. The following Monday brought news that spread through Kincaid Industries like wildfire. Grant was restructuring the company, creating a new position, Vice President of Organizational Culture and Development, and he was offering it to Sophie. Helen delivered the message personally, her eyes twinkling with barely suppressed excitement. "He wants to see you in his office." "And Sophie?" "Say yes. This company needs someone who actually understands people, not just profit margins." Sophie walked to Grant's office with her heart pounding. The Crystal Award from the gala sat on his credenza, catching the afternoon light. Grant looked healthier than he had in weeks, energized in a way that had nothing to do with business deals. "Before you say anything," Grant began, "I want you to understand what I'm offering. This isn't a token position or a feel-good gesture. I'm asking you to help rebuild this company's culture from the ground up, to implement the kinds of changes you recommended at Innovate Tech, to make sure everyone who works here feels valued and seen." "Grant, I don't have the experience for a VP position. I don't have an MBA or—" "You have something more valuable," Grant interrupted. "You have empathy, intelligence, and the courage to speak truth to power. The MBA stuff you can learn. The rest is who you are." Sophie thought about Mia, about the future she wanted to build, about the consulting work with Patricia that was just beginning to take off, about the life she was creating beyond survival mode. "Can I think about it?" she asked. Grant smiled. Take all the time you need. But Sophie, you've already proven you can do this. The only question is whether you believe it. Sophie left his office with the offer weighing on her mind and her heart. A VP position meant financial security, career advancement, the chance to make real change at a company she knew intimately. But it also meant giving up the flexibility of consulting, the freedom to build something entirely her own. She called Patricia that evening, laying out the offer and her confusion. What does your gut tell you? Patricia asked. That I'm terrified of making the wrong choice. That I want both options and I can't have them. Why not? Sophie blinked. What? Why can't you have both? Patricia's voice was thoughtful. What if you took the VP position part-time? 3 days a week at Kincaid Industries, 2 days consulting with me. Companies do hybrid arrangements all the time now. Grant values you. I bet he'd be open to negotiation. The idea settled into Sophie's mind like a puzzle piece clicking into place. She didn't have to choose between security and freedom. She could build a life that included both. The next morning, Sophie walked into Grant's office with a proposal. Part-time VP position at Kincaid Industries, with the flexibility to maintain her consulting work with Patricia, a partnership approach that would allow her to grow in both directions. Grant listened carefully, his expression unreadable. When Sophie finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. Done. Draw up the terms you want and I'll sign off on them. Sophie, you just negotiated your first executive contract. How does it feel? Sophie felt a grin spread across her face. Terrifying. Exhilarating, right. Over the next month, Sophie settled into her new dual role. 3 days a week, she worked at Kincaid Industries, implementing culture changes and training programs, meeting with staff at all levels to understand their experiences. 2 days a week, she consulted with Patricia, helping other companies recognize and value their support teams. The work was hard and exhausting and more fulfilling than anything Sophie had ever done. She was making a real difference, changing systems that had been broken for years, and she was being recognized for it, not just with a title and salary, but with respect. Mia adapted to the new schedule with the resilience of childhood, proud to tell her friends that her mama was very important at her job now. Tessa became Sophie's regular backup for childcare emergencies, reveling in her role as the fun aunt who let Mia stay up late and eat ice cream for breakfast. And Grant stepped back from day-to-day operations, spending more time with Jace, rebuilding their relationship one honest conversation at a time. He still came into the office regularly, but now he left at 5 to have dinner with his son, to attend the university lectures Jace was preparing, to be the father he'd failed to be when Emily was alive. 3 months after the gala, Sophie received an invitation to speak at a national conference for administrative professionals. The keynote address, with her speech from the Innovation Leader Awards as the foundation. She almost declined, old habits of invisibility rising up to tell her she wasn't qualified. Then she thought about all the assistants she'd interviewed at Innovate Tech, about Kara and the others who were still fighting to be seen. She thought about Mia watching her mama step into her power. She thought about the woman she'd been 2 months ago, terrified to accept an award, and the woman she was becoming. Sophie accepted the invitation. The conference was held in Chicago in early spring, and Sophie brought Mia with her, turning it into a small adventure. They visited museums and ate deep dish pizza and practiced the speech in their hotel room until Mia could recite parts of it by heart. "You're going to be amazing," Mia said the morning of the keynote, her absolute certainty unchanged, "because you always are." Sophie walked onto that stage in front of 2,000 administrative professionals and felt the weight of their expectations, their hopes, their desperate need to be told that they mattered. She looked out at the sea of faces and saw herself reflected back, people who worked hard and loved deeply and deserved so much more than invisibility. She told them her story, not just the gala, but everything that led up to it. The years of feeling unseen, the small indignities, the slow erosion of self-worth. And then the moment Grant gave her a choice, to stay invisible or step into the light, the terror and triumph of choosing to be seen. "You're not just anything," Sophie told them, her voice strong and clear. "You're not just assistants or just coordinators or just support staff. You're the people who make everything else possible. You're essential. And it's time the world recognized that." The applause was deafening. 2,000 people rose to their feet, and Sophie saw tears on faces throughout the audience. After the speech, she was mobbed by attendees wanting to share their stories, to thank her, to tell her she'd given them the courage to advocate for themselves. One woman, probably in her 50s, grabbed Sophie's hands with desperate intensity. "I've been an executive assistant for 30 years, she said, her voice shaking. 30 years of being invisible, of swallowing disrespect, of wondering if I was crazy for thinking I deserved better. Thank you for telling me I'm not crazy. Thank you for saying out loud what I've felt for decades." Sophie hugged her, this stranger who was also a sister in invisibility, and felt the weight of purpose settle onto her shoulders. This was the work that mattered, not just changing individual companies, but shifting an entire culture's understanding of worth and value. When she returned to her hotel room that night, exhausted but energized, Mia was waiting up despite the late hour. "Everyone loved you," Mia announced. "I could tell. They loved you because you told them the truth." Sophie pulled her daughter close. "You know what the best part was? Knowing that you were watching. That you're growing up seeing that women can be scared and brave at the same time. That we don't have to choose between being kind and being strong." "I always knew that," Mia said sleepily. "Because I have you." 6 months after the gala, on a crisp October afternoon, Sophie stood in front of a modest storefront in her neighborhood, keys in hand. The space had been empty for years, but Sophie had seen its potential the moment Patricia suggested it. "Are you sure about this?" Tessa asked, standing beside her with Mia perched on her hip. Sophie looked at the sign being installed above the door. Hart and Associates. Organizational Culture Consulting. Her name. Her business. The thing she was building entirely on her own terms. "I'm terrified," Sophie admitted. "But yes, I'm sure." She unlocked the door and stepped inside the empty space that would become her office. Patricia was already there, directing furniture delivery with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. "Welcome to the next chapter," Patricia said, grinning. "Partner?" They'd formalized their partnership the week before, making Sophie an equal owner in the expanding consulting practice. The work with Kincaid Industries continued 3 days a week, but this was hers. A space to build something that would outlast any single job, any one person's faith in her. Mia ran through the empty rooms, her laughter echoing off bare walls. "Mama, it's perfect. Can I have my own desk for when I visit?" "You can have anything you want, baby," Sophie said, watching her daughter spin in circles, fearless and free. That evening, Sophie hosted a small celebration at the new office. Grant came, looking healthier than he had in years, with Jace at his side. The relationship between father and son was still healing, still fragile, but there was warmth there now, possibility. Tessa arrived with champagne and bagels, because that was the kind of celebration she believed in. Even Helen from Kincaid Industries stopped by, bringing a plant for Sophie's new desk. "To new beginnings," Grant said, raising his glass. "And to Sophie Hart, who taught this old workaholic that the people who keep the world running deserve to be celebrated, not overlooked." "To Sophie," everyone echoed. Sophie felt tears threaten but blinked them back, smiling instead. "To everyone who's ever felt invisible," she said. "May we all find the courage to step into the light." As the small gathering talked and laughed, Mia tugged on Sophie's sleeve. "Mama, are you happy?" Sophie looked around the room at the people who'd supported her, believed in her, pushed her to be more than she thought possible. She thought about the work she was doing, the lives she was changing, the future she was building for herself and her daughter. "Yes, baby," Sophie said, pulling Mia close. "I'm very happy." And she was. Not because everything was perfect. Her apartment was still small, money was still sometimes tight, doubt still crept in during quiet moments. But she was building something real, something meaningful. She was using her voice to advocate for others who felt voiceless. She was teaching her daughter that worth isn't bestowed by others, it's claimed for yourself. The celebration wound down as evening turned to night. Grant was the last to leave, pausing at the door to look back at Sophie. "Emily would have loved you," he said quietly. "She would have loved your courage, your conviction, your refusal to stay small. Thank you for helping me honor her memory in a way that actually matters." Sophie hugged him, this man who'd given her a chance when she was too afraid to take it. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible." "You were never invisible," Grant corrected gently. You just needed permission to believe in yourself. I'm glad I got to be part of that journey. After everyone left, Sophie and Mia sat together in the empty office, surrounded by boxes waiting to be unpacked and possibilities waiting to be realized. Tell me the story again, Mia asked, snuggling against Sophie's side. About the night you gave the speech. Sophie smiled and began the tale that was already becoming legend between them. The story of a woman who'd spent years being invisible, who was given a chance to be seen, who found the courage to speak her truth in front of hundreds of people who didn't think she belonged. And then what happened? Mia prompted, even though she knew the answer by heart. Then everything changed, Sophie said. Not all at once, and not always easily. But slowly, step by step, I built a life where I didn't have to hide anymore, where I could be proud of who I was and what I did, where I could raise you to know that you never have to shrink to make others comfortable. And we lived happily ever after, Mia finished, the way she always did. Sophie kissed her daughter's forehead. We lived bravely ever after, which is even better. They sat together in the gathering darkness, mother and daughter, invisible no more. Outside, the city moved and breathed around them, full of people just trying to survive, to matter, to be seen. Some of them would find their way to Sophie's door eventually, seeking help to transform their workplaces, their cultures, their understanding of what it meant to value every person. And Sophie would be here, ready to help them. Not because she had all the answers, but because she knew what it felt like to be overlooked and undervalued. She knew the power of being seen, and she knew that sometimes all it took was one person speaking up to change everything. The crystal award from the gala sat on Sophie's new desk, catching the streetlight through the window. She ran her fingers over the engraving one more time, reading the words that had changed her life. Grant Kincaid, Lifetime Achievement Award. But Sophie knew the truth now. The real achievement wasn't the award itself. It was what came after. The choice to use her visibility to help others, to transform fear into courage, to build something meaningful from the ashes of invisibility. Sophie Hart had spent years being the person nobody noticed, the assistant who made the coffee and kept everything running while staying carefully out of sight. She'd been comfortable there, safe in her smallness. But Grant had given her a choice, and Mia had given her courage, and Tessa had given her unwavering support, and Sophie had given herself permission to be more. That was the real story. Not the gala or the speech or the standing ovation, but the quiet, terrifying, exhilarating decision to stop hiding and start living. Outside, the autumn wind picked up, scattering leaves across the sidewalk. Winter was coming with all its cold and challenge, but Sophie wasn't afraid. She'd faced her fears and discovered that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. She was no longer invisible. She was Sophie Hart, consultant, advocate, mother, woman who'd found her voice and refused to be silenced. And she was just getting started.